Night poured like ink over the ruined fortress, and a silver moon hung too low. Crimson warning sigils flickered in the sky, glitching like broken neon signs. Riku Kurobane sprinted across fractured stone, bare feet slapping on pale dust. His avatar wore nothing but torn shorts and a chipped crow mask over his face. Behind him, the world howled as polygons shattered and rebuilt in jagged loops. Black static oozed from the ground, forming tendrils that chased him like smoke. "This is not a normal event. This is not a normal event. This is bad," he hissed. A tendril lashed past his shoulder, and the damage indicator stayed stubbornly empty. That was the worst part, Riku thought, because things that ignored numbers meant danger. The game called it Elysium Frontier, a full dive paradise with tasteful difficulty. He called it the first game that ever managed to make his stomach twist with dread. Another tendril slammed down and the stone around him deformed like wet graphite. His field of view jerked as the engine struggled, then smoothed in a false calm. Far ahead, beyond the collapsing courtyard, a portal flickered above broken stairs. It was a ragged circle of light, as if someone had forced a hole through the code. Riku grinned under the bird mask, a sharp private smile nobody else could see. "If the universe throws a bug at me, I am morally obliged to poke it," he muttered. He veered sideways, vaulted a cracked wall, and cut across a maze of broken arches. The minimap in the corner of his vision had become pure static 10 minutes earlier. Party chat showed only 3 grayed icons where his temporary allies had disconnected. He had watched them pop like bubbles when the boss screamed, their avatars dissolving. The system log blandly insisted they had performed a normal logout from the lobby. Riku did not trust that for a second, but he trusted his curiosity even less. Another tremor rolled through the fortress, and stone pillars fell like brittle bones. In the distance, the boss roared again, but the sound was out of sync with its mouth. He risked a glance back and saw it rearing, a colossal wolf made of broken mirrors. Fragments of its body never aligned correctly, edges sawing through themselves slowly. Errors crawled along its fur as red symbols, then dripped off into the air like rain. He had fought raid bosses in hundreds of busted indie games, but nothing like this. Elysium Frontier was famous for polished systems, handcrafted encounters, no shortcuts. Yet here he was, chased by impossible code inside a game that should never truly break. Riku lunged over another gap, toes catching the ledge, fingers scraping rough stone. The crow mask limited his peripheral vision, a challenge modifier he picked willingly. Trash game habits died hard, and he refused to play pretty even in a perfect world. The portal grew larger with each desperate step, its light flickering unhealthy white. Lines of hidden geometry showed within it, concentric rings like an exposed iris. A whisper slid through the air, not sound, but a texture dragging across his thoughts. "Player detected outside valid encounter zone," the whisper said, layered and wrong. He landed on the final stair, boots crunching shards, and the system finally reacted. A red window popped into his view, clipping through the cracked stone at forehead height. The warning text jittered, letters spilling into symbols he had never seen before. "Unauthorized access path," it read, then glitched into a string of unprintable marks. Buttons labeled confirm and cancel flickered, trading places 3 times per second. Riku laughed once, sharp and breathless, because this felt like home in a strange way. Broken design, strange behavior, rude threats from software, he could understand those. "All right, Mystery Portal, show me what you have got," he said, and reached forward. His finger tapped, C-O-N, firm, or maybe cancel. The interface refused to stay obedient. For a split second, his haptic feedback cut out, and the fortress vanished utterly. Darkness fell, but the loading icon never appeared, and the silence felt too physical. A heartbeat thumped loud in his ears, not synthetic sound, but the real one in his chest. He knew that rhythm from medical scans, from nights staring at hospital ceilings silently. A new window opened in the black, not flat, but spherical, wrapping around his whole vision. "Calibration in progress," a calm, neutral voice said, overlapping his own internal echo. Cold slid along his arms where the dive suit met skin, and that was another wrong detail. Elysium Frontier used the standard neural lattice rig, not a full-body immersion capsule. Touch beyond preset contact points meant firmware modification, and that meant danger. Numbers marched across his vision, not damage ticks, but biometric readings and tags. Elevated heart rate, mild dehydration, minor sleep debt. Someone had peaked too deeply. Riku clenched his hands, even though he knew the motion was simulated and unnecessary. "Hey, system, you are not supposed to know about my water intake schedule," he said softly. The neutral voice did not answer, which he found much worse than any canned reply. Instead, faint lines traced themselves through the dark, sketching an outline of terrain. They drew a ghostly forest first, then a road, then a small town under a bright midday sun. Everything felt like a concept art draft, no textures, just light and depth and silence. The portal he had chased now hung above the road like a second sun carved into reality. A cursor blinked in the air, waiting for something he could not yet guess, patient and pale. Riku had two options, the same two he always pretended were choices when games broke. He could force a logout and pretend none of this had happened, or he could walk forward. His thumb hovered near the emergency disconnect gesture, muscles remembering the motion. He held it there for exactly 3 seconds, then sighed and dropped his hand very slowly. "Fine, unknown debug layer, you win 1 round," he said, and stepped toward the drawn road. The world accepted his decision with a soft chime, like glass tapped with a fingernail gently. Color rushed in all at once, flooding the blank shapes with unreal saturation and sharp detail. The town snapped into clarity, cobblestones, wood beams, banners snapping in a phantom breeze. Sound followed half a moment later, overlapping footsteps, distant chatter, metal on stone clearly. It was the standard starting town, he realized, but every edge was too crisp, too perfectly aligned. Elysium Frontier prided itself on realism, including scuffed walls and mismatched textures prettily. Here, nothing was chipped or worn, as if the world had been rebuilt for a product photographed carefully. A notification chimed and his interface realigned, but the style had changed in small, unnerving ways. The fonts were thinner, the icons sharper, and the health bar pulsed with a subtle organic rhythm. "Welcome to Elysium Frontier," the logo said, but a small new subtitle glowed beneath it, unwavering. "Experimental Layer 7 Build," it read, and the text was tagged with his username specifically. Riku's username had always been fairly childish, a relic from his first broken cartridge shooter. In this world, he went by Knocked Crow, a reference to the crow mask he wore in nearly every game. The subtitle pulsed once more and added a line, as if the system had just remembered social graces. "Congratulations, Knocked Crow," it said. "You have been selected for anomaly containment testing." He stared at the words until they blurred, then blinked hard and forced his breathing to even out. Testing meant monitoring, special rules, maybe exclusive rewards, and also invisible strings carefully. He opened the menu to check for a support contact, but half the options flickered, then refused input. Customer help, bug report, logout timer adjustment, all of them grayed out with tiny padlocks. Only play, status, and settings responded, and settings contained only brightness and volume sliders. A thin laugh escaped him before he could stop it, and a passing NPC gave him a polite, simulated glance. "Of course you trapped me on the weirdest possible server," he whispered, more to himself than anyone. He tapped status and watched his character sheet unfold in layered panes above his outstretched hand. Level 1, as expected for a fresh instance, but his skill list held a single unfamiliar entry alone. "Anomaly Sense," it read, a passive ability with no numerical description, only a vague text note. "Reveals irregularities in the surrounding environment when focused," the tooltip explained curtly. His starting gear showed his basic cloth pants and a wooden knife, nothing like the crow mask before. The system had wiped his old avatar, but his reflection still wore the same lean frame and messy hair. A fountain in the town square served as a perfect mirror, its water unnaturally still in the basin. A different mask covered his face here, a white porcelain thing with no mouth, only 2 black eyes. Riku reached up on reflex to remove it, and the system gently refused with a soft negative chime. "Cosmetic lot for current test sequence," a tiny info box said, cheerful and stubborn. He tilted his head and the reflection copied him, the empty eyes somehow managing to look amused. "You look like a bargain bin horror movie extra," he muttered, and the mask whispered nothing back. Voices swelled behind him as more players materialized in motes of light at the edge of the plaza. They appeared in clusters, laughing, shouting, running toward quest boards with practiced hunger. Overhead, the sky glowed an impossible blue, with birds wheeling in patterns that almost looped. Almost, but not quite, and his new passive tingled faintly along the back of his mind repeatedly. This was how Elysium Frontier usually began, but something about the rhythm felt half a step off. Movements repeated too perfectly, an archer stretching in the same sequence every 7 seconds. A child NPC chased a painted ball in a loop, stumbling on the same stone each time without fail. The crowd around him thickened, but nobody seemed to notice the glitches, or they ignored them totally. Riku stepped away from the fountain, and the sense of wrongness sharpened, narrowing into a direction. It felt like a compass handed to his thoughts, tugging gently toward the mouth of a narrow side alley. The alley lay between two pristine houses, their windows glossy and dark, their doors too identical. A quest marker did not glow there, and the minimap showed only blank masonry where the gap existed. "You want me to walk into the obvious horror hallway on day 1? He murmured, almost impressed. His thumb twitched toward the main street automatically, where tutorial prompts beckoned safely. He imagined running a normal build, joining a beginner party, grinding wolves and slimes politely. The idea felt thin in his mouth, tasteless after years of wading through disastrous code hungrily. Curiosity gnawed at him, the same old friend that had broken so many save files and controllers. Riku rolled his shoulders, feeling the suit respond with little artificial pressures along his spine. "Fine," he said quietly to the sky, the server, and the invisible engineers behind the curtain. "You picked the wrong guy if you wanted a stable test subject, but you picked a stubborn one. I always run toward the bug, never away." He turned his back on the main square and slipped into the alley, leaving sunlight behind him. Sound dulled after 3 steps, chatter fading as if swallowed by thick velvet curtains silently. The alley stretched longer than it had any right to, a straight line that refused to narrow quickly. At the far end, a door waited, plain wood, no handle, a faint glow seeping around its edges softly. With each step, the anomaly sense icon brightened in the corner of his vision, pulsing like a vein. It felt like standing too close to a high-voltage fence, hair lifting, skin prickling under static. Halfway down, his interface glitched, and for a heartbeat, the Logout icon flashed angrily into sight. Then it vanished again, replaced by a line of text that scrolled past too quickly to grasp clearly. He caught only fragments, something about threshold values and unsupervised entry. Then it was gone. The door loomed up faster than he expected, space folding subtly while the texture stayed convincing. Up close, the wood looked almost real, uneven grain, tiny scratches, scars of imagined weather. Riku reached out and knocked once, because manners cost nothing, online or off, his mother had said. The sound that answered was not a knock, but a dull heartbeat thud from the other side of the door. A chill spidered down his neck, and his real fingers twitched against empty air inside the dive rig. "If this is some edgy horror crossover patch, I am demanding cosmetic compensation," he joked weakly. The door opened without his touch, swinging inward on hinges that made no sound at all, just absence. Darkness lay beyond, not the void of loading screens, but dense black-like cloth soaked in ink. At the very bottom of his interface, a new tiny symbol appeared, a dot with 4 orbiting rings. He focused on it, and a label unfolded, crisp letters naming a feature he had never seen advertised. "Observer Channel," it read, with a status icon set to AC-TV and a viewer count of 1. Riku stared at that number until he could almost feel the unseen gaze pressing against the back of his head. Somebody, or something, was watching this sequence live, not as a script, but as an unpredictable run. His pulse climbed another notch, and the biometric overlay in the corner turned a slightly warmer orange. "Enjoy the show then," he said, lifting his chin toward no one, mask hiding the tremor in his mouth. "If I trip the system, you are going down with me as audience." With that, he stepped through the door as the alley and the town and the safe blue sky folded shut. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed everything was the viewer count flickering suddenly higher. 1 became 2, then 3, then 5, as others discovered the channel and tuned in silently. Darkness did not feel like a loading screen this time. It felt like a lid closing slowly. A low hum vibrated in Riku's bones, as if the dive rig had sunk a little deeper into him. He lifted a hand in front of his face and saw nothing, not even the faint outline of fingers. The system usually overlaid a faint grid in blackout scenes, but here there was only absence. Anomaly! Sense pulsed in the corner of his sight, somehow visible without any visible light. A faint outline traced itself around his body, like chalk on a blackboard that remembered him. Then thin white lines scattered outward, sketching a room around him with hesitant movements. Floor, walls, a ceiling too low for comfort, everything built from wireframe geometry alone. The lines thickened, skins of texture snapping over them like muscles growing on a skeleton. He stood in a chamber of smooth stone and metal, small, circular, with no obvious exit door. Overhead, a single lamp burned with sterile clarity, yet cast no shadows anywhere around him. In front of him floated a translucent cube, rotating in silent defiance of gravity and sense. Within the cube swam symbols he had seen earlier, the broken letters that replaced warnings. A progress bar circled the cube like a halo, crawling forward at a pace that mocked impatience. Text unfolded above it, sharp and clean, every letter too precise to be rendered casually. Test Instance 09 initiated, it said, each word clicking into place like a lock. Subject, Knocked Crow. Classification, persistent. Risk rating, elevated, the system declared calmly. Riku whistled softly, an old habit from offline days, the sound thin against the smooth walls. Persistence sounds rude, he said, then grimaced as his own voice came back clipped and delayed. The echo arrived 1 second late, chopped into pieces, as if the room had to remember the sound. A soft chime rang, and new text replaced the previous lines with almost organic impatience. Observer channel stable. External viewers, 7. Internal controls, restricted. 7 viewers now, he thought, so at least some devs or board staff were watching closely. Or maybe whoever built this mess had automated tools staring at his every little twitch. He found he preferred the idea of annoyed humans stuck on overtime more than silent software. The cube trembled as the progress bar completed, then folded inward and burst like cold glass. Fragments dissolved before they hit the floor, leaving only a simple door outline in the air. It resembled a portal frame from the main game, but thinner, drawn in pale, unfriendly lines. Beyond it he glimpsed trees, but they were too still, as if waiting to decide how to move. Forest test probably, he muttered, recalling countless tutorial hunts across many titles. Riku stepped closer, touching the edge of the frame, and watched it ripple like disturbed water. A notification pinged, this time smaller, almost shy, in the lower left of his interface. Optional advisory: death inside test instance may cause data persistence anomalies. He stared at the sentence for a few long seconds, then exhaled a breath that almost became a laugh. So if I die, weird stuff sticks around, he said quietly, more to organize his thoughts than joke. Most players feared permadeath mechanics, but he mainly feared losing interesting glitches forever. He checked for his inventory reflexively and found only the wooden knife and a handful of bandages. No starter potions, no map scrolls, no flavor items, nothing extraneous, just survival basics. Someone wanted to see how far one stubborn player would push with almost nothing in his pockets. "You really did your homework on me," he said to the unseen audience, the mask hiding his frown. His thumb hovered over the emergency logout combination again, tracing the motion without commitment. Then he set his shoulders, as much as a digital avatar could, and stepped through the waiting door. Cold rushed over him like a waterfall without weight, a change in data rather than temperature. The chamber vanished behind him, taking the sterile light and polite geometry with it instantly. The forest on the other side smelled faintly of resin and wet bark, too vivid for pre-built assets. He knew the difference by now between generic scent packages and custom-tuned environmental effects. Pine needles cushioned his bare feet, each step sending little bursts of tactile feedback upward. Sunlight speared through the canopy in golden blades, cutting the shadowed floor into careful pieces. A breeze threaded through the branches, carrying the murmur of distant water and something metallic. Anomaly sense tingled like a low current along his skin, not flaring but never fully quiet here. This did not feel like the polished starter forest. This felt like the version built before testing. Some trees repeated in suspiciously exact positions, tiny knots mirrored at identical heights. Others shivered slightly, as if undecided about their final shape or texture at a low engine level. He crouched beside a fallen log and ran his hand along its surface, watching splinters react slowly. When he pulled away, a slight delay slipped into the animation, then snapped back into sync sharply. "Lag in a closed test instance is not a performance issue," he murmured, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "That is the system deciding whether it wants to tell the truth about what I just did." A rustle sounded to his left, too heavy for small animals, too clumsy for native forest creatures. He rose smoothly, weight shifting to the balls of his feet, knife loose in one hand and ready. Between two trees, pixels twisted into existence, coalescing into the shape of another player avatar. The spawn effect looked wrong, flickering from model to model before settling on something human. A girl stood there, about his height, wearing light leather armor and a hood pushed carelessly back. Her eyes were hidden behind a pair of tinted goggles that glowed faintly with scrolling glyphs. A name floated above her head, flickering once before stabilizing in crisp, unfriendly letters. "Kaya," it read, with a tiny icon beside it shaped like an eye crossed with a lightning bolt. Riku glanced at his own floating name, noticing for the first time that a similar icon hung there. Their symbols were mirrored, his inverted, hers upright, like two halves of a deliberately broken seal. "You are late," the girl said, voice flat, as if commenting on the weather rather than survival. The words came without echo this time, absorbed by the trees as if they had always belonged here. "We were not given a schedule," Riku answered, keeping his tone light, eyes scanning for distortions. Her gaze flicked to his mask, lingered a second, then dropped to the cheap wooden knife in his hand. "They dropped you with starter gear," she said, faint disdain curling at the edge of the statement. "That means you glitched your way in, not through the formal sign-up protocols." Riku filed that away, layering it carefully with the warnings he had seen and ignored already. "You sound like someone who signed a form first," he said, tilting his head toward her goggles. "I clicked a link," Kaya replied, shrugging once, leather creaking with convincingly rendered strain. They promised unrestricted access to unfinished layers in exchange for non-disclosure agreements. Her mouth twisted briefly, as if she tasted something sour when she said the last three words. "Then I woke up here and the exit disappeared from my menus," she added in the same level tone. Riku felt a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with the dive suit or the mask. "So we are both stuck in a place that should not exist," he said, choosing each word carefully now. "Stuck is imprecise," Kaya replied, tapping one gloved finger against the side of her goggles. "The contract described this as an extended stability observation period with limited support." She repeated the phrase with mechanical precision, as if reading it from some internal overlay. "That is a very polite way to say trapped," Riku said, his laugh short and unsmiling this time. For a heartbeat, the forest stilled, birds freezing mid-flight, leaves arrested in mid-sway. Anomaly sense flared, bright and sudden, then settled into a focused line between two nearby trees. Kaya noticed his slight flinch and turned her head, goggles whirring softly as they recalibrated. "You see it too," she said, more statement than question, already stepping toward the invisible point. Riku followed, senses stretched thin, knife forgotten for the moment, eyes tracking subtle glitches. The ground ahead looked normal, moss and roots and scattered cones, but his skin prickled in warning. As they stepped closer, lines of code ghosted faintly above the soil, visible only when unfocused. They drifted like smoke, fragments of instructions and coordinates, half erased, half persistent. Kaya reached out, her fingers brushing the air where nothing visible should have resisted movement. Sparkles of static danced between her glove and the empty space, forming a crude outline of a shape. It resembled a doorframe lying on its side, buried shallow beneath the skin of the forest floor. "Hidden seam," she said softly, crouching to trace the dimensions of the invisible boundary. access node to another layer maybe, or to clean up routines they do not want regular players seeing. Riku knelt beside her, the mask casting a shadow that did not match the sun's current angle properly. "You have been here longer," he said, watching her hands, her breathing, her small, unguarded gestures. "How many of these seams have you found so far in this unfinished forest?" Kaya hesitated for the first time, goggles dimming slightly as if reacting to a surge of conflicted data. "Enough to know that opening them always costs something," she answered, voice dropping almost to a whisper. She lifted her hand, showing him the faint shimmer around her fingers, like static that never fully discharged. "You keep pieces of the last place with you," she said, curling her hand into a fist as if to contain them. "Physics that does not belong, rules that should not follow, errors that cling like dust in your code." Riku thought of the forbidden warning about data persistence anomalies and felt his mouth go dry slowly. "And you still open them," he said quietly, not accusing, just trying to understand the shape of her resolve. Kaya's lips quirked into something that tried to be a smile and almost made it halfway before falling apart. "If I map them all, maybe I find the one seam that leads properly outward," she said, eyes hidden but intent. "Or at least, I leave a path someone else can use if I am already too corrupted to leave cleanly." He heard something in her words that felt familiar, the stubborn edge that kept people grinding nightmare bosses. Silence settled between them for a moment, filled only by distant water and the rustle of undecided leaves. Then the observer channel icon flickered, drawing both their attention to the corner of their shared sky. The viewer count jumped again, climbing into double digits, then triple, numbers ticking up far too rapidly. "Looks like the audience likes where this is going," Riku said, forcing levity back into his tone as armor. "Then let us give them a sequence they cannot easily replay," Kaya answered, straightening with decisive grace. She placed her palm flat against the hidden frame and nodded once toward Riku, as if offering a silent cue. "On 3, she said, the faintest hint of anticipation sliding into her voice like a sharpened edge. "1, Kaya said quietly as they braced, palms flat against the invisible boundary before them. Anomaly sense screamed, but he ignored it and matched her stance, focusing only on her counting steadily. 2, she continued, while the forest around them dimmed, colors draining as if the world held its breath. 3, they said together as they pushed, and the seam buckled, cracked, then tore open with a jagged roar. The forest screamed in silence as invisible constraints snapped, releasing long-bound routines. Together they pushed, and the seam in reality buckled, cracked, then tore open with a ragged cry. A rush of data howled around them, wind made of numbers and old logs, dragging at their avatars hungrily. The ground dropped away, and for a moment they hung between rendered assets and raw instruction coils. As the world inverted, the observer channel counter spun wildly, glitching into unreadable symbols and colors. Riku had enough time to think that this was exactly his kind of terrible decision before gravity found them again. They fell through a tangle of broken geometry toward a new layer that waited below with its rules sharpened. Riku hit the new layer like a stone through glass, then bounced on invisible ground once. Kaya rolled beside him, her armor sparking faintly as data shards rained in slow arcs. The world around them stuttered, switching skyboxes 3 times before choosing twilight. A ruined city settled into place, buildings leaning like teeth in a cracked metal jaw. Street lamps flickered with sickly light, humming at a pitch that made his teeth ache. He pushed himself up, testing his legs, relieved when gravity behaved on the second try. Above, the observer icon spasmed, its numbers scrambling before freezing on 0 viewers. "Did we lose our audience?" he asked, "or did we fall somewhere even they cannot see?" Kaya rose more cautiously, one hand on her dagger, the other adjusting her glowing goggles. "Channel went dark mid-fall," she said. "Whoever watched us lost the feed or turned away." The silence of the city weighed on them, thick and dusty, like air sealed in an old box. No NPC chatter, no ambient footsteps, no distant vendors, just wind and whining cables. Anomaly sense pulsed harder here, not as a tingle, but as a steady pressure behind his eyes. Every shadow seemed slightly misaligned, lagging half a heartbeat behind its owner stubbornly. Riku flexed his fingers around the knife and forced a crooked smile under the porcelain mask. "Well, congratulations to us," he said. "We speedran straight into the off-limits zone." Kaya snorted once, the sound small but real, then pointed toward the far end of the street. A cluster of icons floated there, faint, not quest markers but something older and stranger. They resembled hazard signs, triangles nested inside circles, edges blinking like nervous eyes. "I saw those in a dev leak once," Kaya murmured, voice dropping as if afraid of eavesdroppers. "They mark sectors where the sim fights itself, places scheduled for deletion or rebuild." He followed her gaze and noticed the way the buildings worked around the distant symbols. Walls bowed inward, then straightened, windows stretched tall, then snapped back like rubber. The asphalt at their feet crawled, texture resolution cycling as if searching for a final skin. "If this zone is pending deletion," he said, "we should probably not stand in the middle." Kaya nodded sharply, then flicked her fingers, opening a local map that looked half erased. Only a few streets glowed solid. The rest were scribbled lines, with warning icons stitched in. A single blue arrow pulsed on the far edge, labeled in small letters as SAFE Point Repeater. "There," she said. "Anchor node. If we reach it, we might lock our data before this collapses." Riku felt the old familiar thrill, that edge between disaster and discovery he craved secretly. "Lead the way then," he said. "You are the one who reads contracts and hidden developer menus." They moved, not running yet, but at a careful pace, eyes tracking alleys and windows constantly. Glitches shimmered at the corner of his vision, vanishing when he tried to look straight at them. On one rooftop, a cat flickered between 3 different models, tail stuttering like broken code. A billboard tried to display an advertisement, cycling instead through static and redacted logos. Halfway down the block, a notification slapped across his vision with the urgency of a blow. "Warning," it read, "Layer 7 hazard protocol engage, hostile cleanup routines active." The words dissolved, replaced by a new mini-map overlay painted with pulsing red vectors. Shapes moved along those vectors, no avatars, just icons shaped like blades and teeth. Kaya cursed softly, then grabbed his wrist and dragged him into the shadow of a broken truck. "Kill scripts," she hissed. "Maintenance hunters. They erase anything flagged as inconsistent." He blinked, mind racing, remembering stories about automated bans that left players comatose. "Erase how?" he asked, keeping his voice flat so panic could not find a foothold on it. "At best, you respawn outside the test with a scrambled log," Kaya said, not sugarcoating it. "At worst, your connection hangs while it tries to resolve impossible data, including you." Metallic footsteps clanged in the distance, too rhythmic to belong to human-controlled avatars. Something tall turned the corner far ahead, frame glitching between drone and armored biped. Its head was a smooth sphere of mirrored black, reflecting a warped version of the empty street. Blades unfolded from its arms like flowers made of scalpels, each edge humming with hard light. A cone of pale light swept from its faceless head, scanning debris, leaving dust frozen in air. Kaya pressed closer to the truck, the metal cold through his avatar's skin. "Anomaly," sense shrieking. "Do not move until it passes," she whispered, breath barely stirring the virtual dust motes. The hunter walked slowly, every step triggering small corrections in the geometry beneath it. When its search cone touched a collapsed balcony, the entire structure rewound to an earlier frame. Bricks flew upward, dust unshattered, beams straightened until the building looked newly placed. It paused, the light lingering on a dangling cable that flickered between cut and intact states. Riku felt the beam brush the edge of his foot, an icy numbness spreading up his leg immediately. A tiny window popped up, listing his coordinates and a query about compliance with world rules. "Stay still," Kaya breathed, fingers digging into his sleeve as if anchoring him to this layer. The hunter processed briefly, then reclassified the reading and swept the cone away in silence. Relief hit him like a body blow when it finally turned down a side street, vectors shifting with it. Kaya did not relax until the minimap showed the hunter icon 3 intersections away and receding. "We are flagged as test assets for now," she said, shoulders tense. That confused its filters. Riku exhaled, then forced his leg to respond, pins and needles fading as the world recalculated. "Good," he said. "Let us reach that anchor before the system updates its opinion about us." They slipped from cover and cut through a convenience store, shelves frozen mid-topple on the floor. Packages hovered in the air at odd angles, labels blank, barcodes crawling like tiny centipedes. A soft chime rang as they passed the counter, though no one stood there to sell them anything now. On the far wall, a security mirror showed their reflections, but something in the image was wrong. In the mirror, Riku wore his old crow mask from the fortress, not the porcelain one given here. Kaya's reflection stood a step behind her real position, goggles removed, eyes dark and tired. "Do you see that?" he asked quietly, not pointing, letting his gaze flick instead to the ceiling. Kaya glanced toward the mirror, then jerked slightly, composure cracking for the first time today. "That is from before this layer," she said, voice calm. "Old states of us bleeding through." The mirror rippled, the surface thinning, the reflections moving like trapped ghosts. His mirrored self raised a hand and tapped the glass from the inside, mask tilting in inquiry. A spiderweb of cracks shot across the mirror as anomaly sense flared into a migraine of light. "Do not touch it," Kaya snapped, dragging him away as the first shard threatened to fall outward. The world flickered, aisles stretching, then compressing, doors multiplying along the far wall. For 1 second, every door showed a different scene beyond it, like channels on a broken TV. A forest, a burning desert, a hospital corridor, a blank cube, then only gray static remained. All at once, the images collapsed inward with the sound of a breath dragged through tight teeth. The store snapped back to its ruined state, the mirror now a smooth black disk without reflection. "Layer boundaries are fraying," Kaya said, more to herself than to him, like updating rough notes. "If we stall much longer, we will be crossing seams just by walking straight ahead carelessly." They pushed through the back door into an alley clogged with frozen trash bags and rusted bikes. The sky above was darker now, clouds thickening unnaturally fast, pixels visible at their edges. Riku could see the safe poet marker more clearly, pulsing atop a distant tower like a heartbeat. Between them and the tower, red vectors twisted, converging, hunters regrouping in patterns. He felt the world narrowing on their path, like a funnel designed to test how far they would go. "Ready to sprint?" he asked, adjusting his grip, feeling the city gather itself against them. Kaya rolled her shoulders, every motion economical, eyes locked on the distant blue anchor glow. "We run on my mark," she said, expression hard now, "and we do not stop for anything weird." Riku laughed once, short and fierce, savoring the absurdity of that condition in this place deeply. "In this world," he said, "everything is weird but fine. I will pretend that is a simple request." Kaya took one breath, then another, then snapped her fingers, triggering a temporary speed buff. "Mark," she said, and together they bolted from the alley as the city woke fully to hunt them down. Boots hammered the cracking asphalt as Riku and Kaya sprinted, speed buff burning hot. Red vectors converged on the minimap, sharp arrows curving to cut them off from ahead. Above, the sky glitched between sunset and night, stars blinking on and off like errors. Kaya vaulted a wrecked sedan, hand bracing the hood as the metal texture crawled oddly. Riku slid under a fallen sign, his mask scraping sparks where polygons insisted on friction. Behind them, a hunter dropped from a rooftop, landing hard enough to jolt nearby windows. Its mirrored head snapped toward them, search cone flaring wide, bright as a surgical lamp. "Ignore it. Keep moving," Kaya shouted, words clipped by the wind and grinding geometry. The safe peepant marker pulsed brighter with each step, a blue heartbeat in the smoggy distance. A second hunter emerged from an alley, legs unfolding with insect precision and cold grace. Riku cut left, following Kaya as she ducked into a narrow street lined with shuttered shops. Hanging lanterns swung above them, changing designs each frame, festivals stitched together. Ahead, the road dissolved into a yawning hole where the layer had been partially erased. Data fragments floated over the gap, tiny cubes spiraling upward like ash in slow motion. "Jump pattern," Kaya said, scanning. "The cubes are solid every third frame of rendering." Riku grimaced, remembering platform hells from old bugged games that ate timing mistakes hungrily. He watched the cubes flicker, counted under his breath, then hurled himself into the sparkling air. His feet hit a cube that felt both hard and hollow, impact delayed by half a stolen heartbeat. He leaped again, following Kaya's rhythm as she danced across vanishing geometry with precision. Below them, the void seethed, full of half-loaded assets and numbers ticking like trapped insects. One misstep would drop them into a place the engine could not describe and might not release. A warning pinged as a hunter's scan beam grazed the tail of Riku's coat mid-flight arc. The cube under his foot flickered unstable, textures melting, physics asking dangerous questions. He gritted his teeth and lunged for the far ledge, fingers scraping the crumbling pavement edge. Kaya grabbed his wrist with a grunt, hauling him the last span as the cube imploded behind them. They landed hard, rolled, and came up running again, lungs burning though no air was truly used. Anomaly sense roared, then narrowed, pointing like a spear toward the distant anchor tower. Buildings thinned as they neared the city center, replaced by skeletal frames and exposed wiring. The sci-fi point structure rose ahead, a spire of glass and code, half-finished and still assembling. Panels slid into place along its sides, sometimes clipping through each other, then correcting. A ring of inactive terminals circled the tower base, screens dark, cables vanishing into nothing. Between them and that base stood 3 hunters, arranged like statues around an invisible altar. Their mirrored heads turned in perfect unison as Riku and Kaya skidded to a halt on broken stone. "We cannot sneak past that," Riku said, stating what the minimap already screamed in red text. Kaya's jaw tightened as she flicked through menus, closing error messages that spawned instantly. "Anchor will not accept a partial sync," she replied. "We both have to stand on the pad alive." Riku eyed the hunters, watched their idle loops, searching for asymmetry, any mistake in routine. The central hunter's blades were chipped in one frame, pristine in the next, a visual stutter. Every 8 seconds their search cones crossed, leaving a brief blind wedge directly ahead. "There," he said, pointing. "We have a rhythm window if we can survive 8 seconds in range." Kaya nodded once, fingers already tracing a quit buff chain, icons flaring along her status bar. "I will jam their scan for 3 seconds," she said. "After that, we dodge or we evaporate." Riku laughed, a sharp sound that cut the tension just enough for his hands to stop shaking. "Evaporation is banned from my schedule today," he said, settling into a loose fighting stance. He still only had the wooden knife, but in his mind, it weighed like every broken weapon he loved. The mask hid his grin, but not the way his avatar leaned forward, ready to throw himself in fully. Kaya stepped beside him, shoulder almost touching, the glow in her goggles brightening like sunrise. "On 3 again," she said, and despite everything, he felt a ridiculous sense of déjà vu returning. "1," she murmured as the hunter's cones began their slow, intersecting dance across the plaza. "2," she said as data wind rose, loose code whipping around them like digital dust devils. "3!" they shouted together and charged, the city holding its breath as they sprinted forward. Kaya snapped her wrist and a burst of static ripped across the plaza, white noise made visible. The hunters flinched, searchlights fuzzing into clouds of broken pixels around them. Riku closed the distance to the nearest hunter, sliding under a lazy blade swipe that still hummed. He slashed up with the knife, not at armor, but at a seam where 2 meshes overlapped. The wooden blade should have bounced, yet instead it bit into the glitch, carving light. The hunter spasmed, model cycling through prototypes, limbs stretching at cruel angles. A damage readout appeared, not numbers, just the single word, COR erupted, jagged and red. Kaya hurled a glyph like a broken circuit at the second hunter, skill list rewriting live. It hit the mirrored head and spread like frost, replacing reflections with crawling static. The third hunter advanced, less hindered, blades unfolding in patterns that split the air. Riku pivoted, back to Kaya's, feeling her presence like an anchor as vectors closed in. The jam faded, scan cones resolving, harsh lights slamming into them with brutal force. Status windows exploded into his vision, queries about identity and layer compliance. He ignored them, focused on attack rhythm, the small openings between correction cycles. A blade clipped his side, not cutting, but erasing part of his model into shimmering static. Pain hit as a cold burn, deeper than normal feedback, echoing faintly along real nerves. Health dropped, and beside it, a new bar flashed, draining with each brush of hunter light. "They are not just killing us," he shouted. They are scraping pieces of our link clean. Kaya cursed and slammed a palm down, releasing a wave that twisted gravity for an instant. The hunters staggered as the plaza warped, legs sinking into stone turned briefly fluid. Riku seized the chance, leaping to the central hunter's shoulder, knife digging at its neck. He drove the blade down with both hands, targeting a flicker where its hitbox faltered. The hunter screamed in machine noise, sound stretching, then snapping into black shards. The unlabeled bar above his health ticked back, as if killing the routine reclaimed pieces. The other hunters recalibrated, legs wrenching free, blades reorienting toward Riku coldly. Kaya intercepted, drawing their fire with a luminous decoy that rose out of her own shadow. Scanned beams locked to the decoy, interrogating its impossible stats as code began to fray. "Pad, now!" she yelled, hauling Riku toward the tower's base platform at a dead sprint. They vaulted dead terminals, feet hitting the circular pad just as the decoy collapsed. A low thrumming started beneath them, rising from the pad into their bones like hard music. Blue light surged upward, forming a dome that snapped closed before the blades could reach. Impacts rang against the shell, sparks spraying where attacks meant higher anchor permissions. The hunters blurred, models degrading, then dissolving into threads that fled the structures. The plaza retextured around the dome, cracks knitting, debris rewinding, dusk settling again. A new window unfolded between them, larger than any since entering Layer 7's rough mesh. "Partial anchor achieved," it read. "Subject integrity stabilized at current corruption threshold." Smaller lines scrolled below, listing anomalies, flagged abilities, and one strange title. Riku watched his username update, a new tag appearing beside Noctcrow in cold blue letters. "Layer Diver," it said, and beside Kaya's name the same title appeared, mirrored once. At the top of the window, the observer icon flickered back, viewer count locked on 1. Whoever watched had the line all to themselves, their unseen gaze settling like weight. "We made it," he said, masking unease with a grin the porcelain mask could not show. Kaya reached up, brushing the domes inside, eyes distant behind softly humming goggles. "No," she answered. "We cleared the easy part. Now they know what kind of bugs we are." Outside the dome, the city stilled, like a predator crouching just beyond the campfire light. Inside, the anchor hummed, menus unlocking, offering choices never shown in any official trailer. Riku felt fear and anticipation mix as a new prompt opened, simple and ruthlessly direct. "Select next layer," it said, showing zones that did not exist in any public record yet. He met Kaya's gaze, seeing his own stubborn curiosity in the tilt of her head and jaw. "So," he asked softly, "how deep before we break this place or it finally breaks us?" Kaya's answer was a crooked smile that suited this unfinished world more than stability. "Only one way to find out," she said, reaching for the impossible list at the same time. The layer list unfolded like a star map, each point a zone tagged with cryptic warnings. Names scrolled past his eyes. Redundant Harbor, Fracture Pit, Mirror, Archive, Silent Farm, and worse. Some entries were blurred, labeled undisclosed, their descriptions nothing but rows of black squares. Others flickered between titles, as if the system had not decided what horror to call them yet. Kaya whistled softly, the sound oddly loud inside the anchor dome's controlled silence. "They gave us the dev menu without the dev manual," she said, eyes tracing the floating list. Riku tilted his head, noting tiny icons beside some zones, shapes that tugged at old instincts. One icon matched the hazard symbols from the ruined city, hostile sectors marked for deletion. Another matched the strange eye sigil beside their names, an unblinking mark of anomaly status. "Look," he said, pointing. "Some layers are tagged with our little cursed eye too stubbornly." Kaya focused, and several zones highlighted, lines linking them into a loose, jagged constellation. "Those are compatible with whatever we picked up crossing seams," she murmured, almost impressed. "Incompatible layers might crash us or strip us until we fit. Neither option sounds pleasant." He found Mirror or Archive in that constellation, its description flickering but partially readable. "Record of all previous states," the text said, "access restricted to supervised diagnostic entities." Beneath that, a smaller line pulsed in red, adding, "Warning, recursive observation causes instability." Riku remembered the store mirror and his crow-masked reflection tapping from the wrong side. "That one is basically daring us," he said, throat dry, "which means it is tailor-made for us." Kaya's lips pressed into a thin line, torn between caution and the same reckless curiosity. "Archive layers are usually safe for dev tools, not for players," she said, voice conflicted. "However, we are not exactly normal players anymore," Riku replied, tilting his head slightly. The observer icon pulsed once, as if acknowledging the remark. Viewer count still locked on 1. Riku frowned at it, uneasy with the idea of a single silent spectator watching every decision closely. "If that is a person, they are very patient," he muttered, "or very scared to interfere openly. Or bound by rules stricter than ours," Kaya said, which would be either comforting or horrifying. She hovered her hand over Miro. Archive, then above a second zone, a safer option called Stable Field. Its description promised controlled combat tests with fixed physics and limited environmental errors. "Safe tutorial hell," Riku said, making a face. "We can grind that anywhere in the normal game." Kaya snorted, a short amused sound, and her fingers drifted back toward Emirar. Archive irresistibly. If the archive really holds previous states, it might know ways out that the live layer forgot, she said. "And if it shows us too much, we unwind like cheat code," Riku replied, oddly calm beneath the words. He realized somewhere along the way he had stopped considering Logout as a real option at all. The game had his pulse, his attention, his fear, but it also had his absolute, dangerous focus. Kaya met his gaze, searching for hesitation, then nodded once, choice crystallizing between them. "Archive first," she said. "If we understand the pattern, other layers might kill us less creatively." "Sold," Riku answered, reaching up to tap Mirror Archive at the exact same time as Kaya. The anchor dome darkened instantly, blue light draining upward into a narrowing vortex. A new message replaced the layer list in stark, unforgiving letters that hurt to read. "Unsanctioned access to diagnostic record," it said. "Test subjects assume all resulting liability." Riku barked a short laugh, unable to help it, the sound swallowed quickly by approaching static. "I love how they pretend we signed anything for this part," he said, voice buzzing around the dome. The floor vanished, leaving them suspended in a weightless column of data spiraling upward slowly. Snapshots flickered around them, freeze frames of zones they had not visited, or not yet. A desert shattering under a glass storm, a castle built inside a monster's ribcage, a void carnival. Between those scenes, dull gray panels showed code edits, comments, angry notes from unseen developers. One line of text floated very close, clear enough to read before the column dragged them higher. "Stop hiding the Layer 7 crash logs," it said. "We need to know why the players did not wake." Kaya reached toward it, but her hand passed through, disturbing only a ripple that faded quickly. "They lost people already," she said quietly, voice barely audible over the roaring data wind. Riku swallowed, throat suddenly tight, mind flashing to news scrolls he had skimmed and ignored. Rumors about test accidents, coma cases, official statements blaming hardware and user negligence. "I thought those were urban legends with good marketing," he said, words sour in his masked mouth. Kaya did not answer, which was worse than any reassurance. Her silence, an admission he disliked deeply. The ascent slowed, the whirlpool of images narrowing until only a single pane remained before them. It unfolded like a door made of glass, behind which a vast hall of mirrors stretched into infinity. "Mirror Archive," the system declared, voice distant. "Entry granted, observation constraints engaged." The pane shattered outward without a sound, fragments melting into a cool, colorless light around them. They stepped forward together and found solid ground, a floor that reflected but did not distort. Rows of towering mirrors lined the hall, each framed in different metals, woods, and glowing code. Some surfaces showed scenes from the game, others reflected only thick, swirling static hungrily. At the far end of the hall, a raised platform held a circular mirror with no frame at all. Anomaly, sense pulsed strongly toward that circle, but also tugged sideways toward scattered mirrors. Each tug felt like a memory trying to surface, linked to places he had never seen consciously. You feel that too? Riku asked, watching Kaya's subtle flinch as her head turned in small increments. Yeah, she said, we are recognized here, like files already stored once and not properly removed. She approached the nearest mirror, its frame made of rusted pipes and tangled cables humming faintly. The surface brightened as she drew near, resolving into a scene of the starting town's plaza. Characters moved there, including Kaya herself, but with different gear and a different posture. That Kaya laughed openly with a full party, her goggles bright, no anomaly icon marking her name. This is from before I signed the contract, the real Kaya said, voice oddly hollow in the hall. In a branch that never happened for you, Riku replied, noting the different day count and weather. He stepped closer and the scene shifted abruptly, showing him instead, maskless, arguing with staff. A cramped office, a paper waiver, his own bored face skimming terms he clearly did not read properly. The Riku in the mirror signed anyway, grinning when someone mentioned exclusive content and challenges. Real Riku felt his stomach drop, even though he knew logically that memory was one possible version. I never signed anything, he said slowly. I just chased a glitched portal in a live raid utterly. The mirror flickered, then split, showing both scenes side by side, disagreeing about the past stubbornly. Kaya laid a hand on the glass. It cooled instantly, freezing both images at the moment of decision. Maybe they imported us differently, she said. Some with paper, some with bugs, same destination. Riku studied his mirrored self, the careless curve of his signature, the casual tilt of his shoulders. He wanted to reach in and slap that version of himself, tell him to go home and sleep instead. Before he could act, anomaly sense surged, pulling his attention toward the frameless mirror beyond. It stood like an open wound in the air, a circle rimmed only by darkness and faint digital noise. Nothing reflected in it, not the hall, not them, not the endless rows of watching surfaces nearby. Instead, it showed a flat, colorless room with a single dive chair and a figure chained to it. The figure wore his mask, the porcelain smooth and expressionless, cables biting into their wrists. Monitors surrounded the chair, each one displaying the game from slightly different perspectives. A small camera lens above the door glowed red, the only point of color in that pale chamber. Riku's pulse hammered in his ears as he realized the chained avatar was not moving at all. Is that me? He asked, barely breathing, or a model of what happens if we fail to exit? Kaya's hand hovered beside his, fingers trembling faintly despite her usual iron control. Archive likes metaphors, she said, but some metaphors here are built from real data streams. The frameless mirror's surface shimmered, and text scrawled across it like handwriting made of light. Subject, knock knock row, it wrote. Link status, AC detective, protective routines, degraded, observer connected. Below that, new words formed as they watched, slow and deliberate, like someone typing from far away. Can you see this? The mirror asked. Answer by touching the glass. Do not speak out loud. Riku stared at the instruction, then at Kaya, then back at the framing darkness around the circle. He lifted his hand once, hesitated, anomaly sense screaming conflicting warnings through his thoughts. If he touched the mirror, something watching might touch back, and not all contact here was safe. If he ignored it, the only apparent friendly signal in this entire nightmare might vanish forever. Kaya watched him, then nodded once, a small, crooked gesture that meant she would back his call. He pressed his fingers to the cold surface. It felt like ice slicked with static and distant echoes. Light flared beneath his touch, tracing his handprint, lines racing outward in fractal patterns. The chained figure in the reflected room twitched, fingers spasming, mask tilting a fraction of an inch. New text scrawled across the mirror faster now, more frantic, letters slightly uneven and human. Good, it wrote. Input path confirmed. Do not trust system prompts. Trust only messages from this channel. Kaya stepped closer, her fingertips barely brushing the edge of Riku's glowing handprint. Who are you? She whispered, the words small, but the mirror responded as if she had shouted loud. Observer, it wrote, then amended. The only one left who still remembers you are not assets. Riku's mouth went dry. The viewer count in the corner remained on 1, pulsing in time with the text. You've been watching since we hit layer 7, he thought, not saying it, letting the idea settle. The mirror responded anyway, as though it heard the shape of his suspicion without sound. Yes, it wrote, and they will notice this conversation soon. Hunters patrol archives differently. A tremor ran through the hall, mirrors chiming like glass in a distant earthquake without origin. Reflections wavered, some warping into grotesque parodies of players mid-combat or mid-laughter. "Ask fast," the mirror added, "before they cut this channel and rewrite our logs as if nothing happened." Riku glanced at Kaya, her jaw was set, eyes burning behind the tinted lenses with focused urgency. "How do we get out without losing pieces of ourselves?" she asked, wasting no letters on pleasantries. The mirror stuttered, static crawling along its edge, then forced words through interference stubbornly. "Anchored deeper," it wrote, "layers above are unstable. Exit from the top shears away corrupted segments. Find the root layer where they first linked your minds. Only there can the chain be broken cleanly." Riku almost laughed. The sound crushed before it formed, because of course the answer was deeper. "Do you know where that root layer is?" he thought, hoping that counted as a fair question properly. The mirror hesitated longer this time, as if consulting riddled records or its own failing memory. "Hidden," it wrote, "beneath a zone called QUII at seed, access buried under multiple false test scenarios." The hall shuddered again. Distant footsteps rang. Not human, not quite mechanical, something in between. On the mini-map, unfamiliar icons appeared at the edge, shaped like eyes with blades for lashes. Archive guardians, maybe. Routines, built specifically to prevent exactly this kind of unauthorized talk. "One more question," Kaya said, voice low but steady. "Why are you risking this for us at all?" For a moment, the mirror cleared entirely, showing only the chained figure breathing shallowly. When the words returned, they were shakier, strokes uneven, like someone writing with numb fingers. "Because you stayed," it wrote. "Last time everyone logged out when the first tests went wrong. You kept playing the broken layers until you reached me. I owe you more than silence as payment." The Guardian's icons crept closer, their paths bending unnaturally, as if drawn to anomalies like blood. The hall's light dimmed, several mirrors went black entirely, their frames twitching with suppressed motion. "Connection ending," the mirror wrote. "I will leave breadcrumbs and error logs. Follow QUIET, seed downward. Do not die in upper layers again. Every death there makes the chain tighter around your real body." The last words smeared as an unseen force yanked the channel away. The surface flashed harsh white. Riku staggered back, hands stinging, Anchordome's comfort now a distant memory in this echoing hall. Kaya caught his elbow before he fell, her grip firm, eyes scanning for incoming threats at once. "Well," she said, breath slightly uneven, "we have our map, our curse, and a deadline with faceless jailers." Riku forced a crooked smile, the mask hiding most of it, but not the stubborn tilt of his head. "Sounds like every good game I ever stuck with too long," he said, "only this one can keep my pulse." Far down the hall, mirrors trembled as dark shapes moved between their frames, closing in steadily. "We should leave before the archive decides to catalog us permanently," Kaya muttered, already turning away. As they stepped back, the frameless mirror dimmed, but one final flicker of text pulsed faintly. It was only a single word this time, easy to miss. Kaya saw it, Riku did not, but felt its weight. "Sorry," it said, almost too small to read before the surface went blank and stayed that way. Kaya's mouth tightened. She stored the word away with the others, another shard of truth to carry. Together they moved down the hall toward the exit node, anomaly sense, guiding them like a restless compass. Behind them, the mirror archive rearranged its reflections, already erasing evidence of the breach. Ahead, new layer choices waited, including one name that now burned in Riku's vision, QUIIS Seed. Every step felt like walking deeper into someone else's unfinished nightmare and choosing to stay awake. The exit node from the archive unfolded like a slit in the air, thin and reluctant to open. Riku and Kaya stepped through together, leaving the murmuring mirrors to rearrange in silence. The anchor dome reassembled around them with a shiver, blue light knitting itself a second skin. Layer options floated once more in front of their eyes, but now one name burned brighter than all. QUIET, Seed, pulsed at the center of the list, its letters soft, its warning label almost apologetic. "Low activity zone," the description claimed. used for long-term baseline behavior observation. Beneath the calm phrasing, a smaller note blinked, barely visible, tagged as obsolete developer lore. Root access tunnels buried beneath stable simulation cells, it said, do not expose to testers. Riku snorted softly behind his mask, the sound more nerves than amusement at that point. They really thought slapping quiet on it would keep people like me away completely. Kaya folded her arms, studying the text with the skepticism of someone burned by fine print. Most players would ignore a zone that advertises nothing but watching and waiting, she said. Which is exactly why they hid the real door there, Riku replied, eyes fixed on the soft glow. The observer icon flickered once again, the lonely viewer count steady but more insistent now. For a heartbeat, he imagined someone on the other side of that number, gripping a desk in worry. Maybe we should give our one fan a show where we survive for a change, he muttered quietly. Kaya's mouth twitched, the ghost of a grin that never quite became one under her hood. Then we follow the only lead we have, she said, lifting a hand toward the QUIAT seed label. Deeper into the thing nobody was supposed to see, Riku answered, fingers rising beside hers. They tapped the name together and the dome responded instantly, blue bleeding into muted green. A soft chime rang, unlike previous abrupt transitions, almost gentle, almost reassuring in tone. Transferring to QUIET, seed, the system said, stability protocols prioritized, sensory load reduced. The anchor dissolved without drama this time, the city, the archive, all fading like distant dreams. The next moment, Riku felt grass under his feet, cool and slightly damp, bending with convincing weight. They stood in a field at dawn, the sky a pale wash of pink and gold, clouds drifting like slow thoughts. A line of low hills rolled away in the distance, dotted with trees that swayed in an easy breeze. Birds sang somewhere unseen, their calls varied but never overlapping in messy, natural chaos. Everything was calm, almost painfully so, after ruined streets and screaming mirrors and hunters. Anomaly sense, however, did not rest. It hummed under his skin like an unused charge of static. The grass nearest his ankles loaded a fraction of a second slower than the rest of the field. Kaya bent, plucking a blade between gloved fingers, watching how it bent and straightened carefully. The physics here are perfect, she said. So perfect it wraps around into something uncanny. They turned slowly, surveying their new surroundings, and spotted the settlement a short walk away. A village clung to the base of one hill. Houses tidy, roofs straight, smoke rising in exact spirals. A dirt road led from the field to its gate, lined with white stones at regular, almost measured gaps. NPCs moved along it, their routines slow and orderly, gestures efficient but strangely uniform. It looks like every peaceful starter town background I have ever clicked through, Riku said. Only this one never expects the player to leave, Kaya replied, voice quiet but firm in judgment. They walked toward the village, cautious yet trying not to look like intruders in their own world. As they approached, a small notification appeared, soft edges, pastel colors, aggressively friendly. Welcome to Quiet Seed Hamlet, it read, with a looping icon of a sprout emerging from soil. Please enjoy a restful experience while the system learns from your natural interactions. Riku eyed the text like it was a trap disguised as a pillow left in the middle of a minefield. Natural interactions, he repeated, says the game to the guy who just stabbed a maintenance god. At the gate, a guard NPC nodded at them, expression mild, spear grounded, armor spotless and plain. Morning, travelers, the guard said, voice warm. The fields are safe today, the wells are clean. His tone carried no quest hook, no implied problem, just a slightly eerie insistence that all was well. Does anything ever go wrong here? Riku asked, testing, watching for scripted tension in the reply. The guard smiled with a delay, like the emotion had to be loaded from memory rather than felt. We rarely see trouble, he said. Our days are quiet, our nights are peaceful, we are fortunate. Anomaly, sense twitched hard at the word rarely, like a finger tapping a hidden crack in stone. Kaya inclined her head politely, pretending to accept the answer instead of dissecting it cruelly. They passed under the arch and into the village, where everything smelled faintly of clean wood. Children ran in loops through the square, their laughter timed to never clash with bell chimes. An elderly woman swept the same patch of ground repeatedly, dust never building beneath her broom. Every cycle of movement synced too neatly, like animations aligned on a master timeline. Baseline behavior observation, Kaya murmured. They wanted long-term patterns, not surprises. Riku nodded slowly, watching how no one ever bumped into anyone else, how voices never rose in anger. Where do you hide a root tunnel in a place built to watch people repeat the same day forever, he said. Under whatever they absolutely never touch, Kai replied, eyes narrowing in thought as she scanned. They saw fields beyond the village, perfectly rotated crops shimmering with dew under the gentle sun. They saw a well in the central square, rope coiled with impossible neatness around the clean stone. They saw a shrine-like structure near the edge of town, though here it resembled a simple tool shed. Above all, they saw a tree on the hill behind the houses, huge and alone, branches like reaching wires. Anomaly. Sense leaned hard toward that tree, a silent hand on Riku's shoulder urging his attention up. At the same time, subtle pulses tugged his awareness toward the well and the unused tool shed. This layer is greedy, he said, uneasy. It wants us to walk every path, touch every possible lever. Then, we choose the one that feels least like a test and most like a forgotten piece, Kaya answered. They headed first toward the well, drawing curious, mild glances from the looping villagers nearby. A bucket rested on the rim, handle smooth, rope waiting, everything arranged like a staged photograph. Kaya peered down, goggles humming as they adjusted focal depth, searching for hidden geometry below. Water surface registers, she said. No obvious access hatch, no layering beyond expected depth. Riku dropped a pebble, watched it fall, listened as it hit the surface after a fair, normal pause. The splash sounded right, the ripples spread correctly, yet Anomaly's sense remained unimpressed. No hidden loading zone on contact, he said, disappointed. Just a very clean, very boring well. They moved on toward the shed, which stood slightly apart, door closed, a faint padlock on its handle. A sign hung crookedly above it, the only crooked thing they had seen in the entire village so far. Maintenance, it read, the letters hand-painted, strokes uneven, as if done by a tired human. Kaya traced the air before the lock, reading invisible tags that flickered in debug layers alone. Non-player accessible, she said, hard flagged, forcing it would trigger hunters faster than before. Riku grimaced at the idea of another fight under observation in a place designed for calm loops. Then the tree, he said, turning toward the hill, the thing everyone sees but never really uses. They climbed a narrow path between houses, each window showing staged domestic scenes in soft focus. No one looked out. Every inhabitant kept their gaze carefully at ground level or on simple tasks. The tree's trunk was massive up close, bark pale and smooth, roots coiling into the hill like cables. Leaves rustled above with a soft mechanical regularity, almost perfectly spaced, almost too regular. A wooden bench encircled part of the trunk, empty, though the wood showed faint imprints of many visits. A plaque was set into the earth before it, inscription shallow, letters worn but still legible. Q-U-I-E-T. Seed, it read, same name as the layer, planted to witness growth, not to be disturbed. Anomaly sense thrummed like a heartbeat now, loud enough that Riku almost heard it as sound. Everything in this place tells us to sit down and let it watch us be calm, he said slowly. Which means the only correct action is the most impolite one we can manage, Kaya replied. She knelt, pressing her palm flat against one of the exposed roots, eyes closing briefly in focus. The root felt solid under her hand, but beneath that solidity, parameters shifted like buried worms. There is more here, she whispered, a second structure coiled under the first, filtered from view. Riku joined her, fingers brushing the bark. The world flickered, and a hidden interface snapped awake. A tiny window opened, visible only when he focused just above his hand, text ghosted and translucent. Root Process Console, it labeled itself. Authorized entities, system, observer, core seed handler. An input line blinked beneath, mocking the absence of any keyboard or obvious control surface. Whoever the handler was either quit or got removed, Riku said, but the console never closed. Kaya's goggles shimmered as she rerouted her own UI, projecting an interface into the blinking line. Archive said breadcrumbs in error logs, she murmured, so we look for misfiled handler commands. She typed a short query, fingers moving without actual keys. data scrolling like falling leaves. Riku caught fragments, path calls, failed authentication attempts, warnings about unauthorized overrides. One line glowed brighter, tagged by the observer's signature, same style as the mirror's handwriting. SE seek route, user ACE exit, it read, followed by a denied status and a reroute toward Quiet Seed. Observer tried to pull someone out clean, Kaya said. System forced them downward instead. Riku felt anger slice through his fear, sharp and cold, at the image of paths cut on purpose. He leaned closer, letting anomaly sense guide his focus toward the gap between allowed commands. A ghost command sat there, half-written, unfinished, waiting for a confirmation that never came back. Route T Tunnel, X-pose, mask at entry, it said, cursor blinking after the last silent parameter. Mask, Riku muttered, realizing only now how tightly his own porcelain mask fit his face always. He touched the command, not activating it yet, just aligning his presence with its incomplete shape. Masked entry, he said. Sounds like it needs a key that already wears a disguise all the time. Kaya eyed his mask, then her own goggles, then the way their anomaly icons mirrored in the air. Try feeding it your visual ID, she said, or we waste the one weird cosmetic they forced on you. Riku focused on the console and on the sense of his mask as both item and identity marker. A soft click echoed in his skull, like a lock turning somewhere deep inside the system's bones. The command line accepted something silently, letters sharpening, denied status icons flickering. New text appeared beneath, small and stark, a question with only two possible answers. Confirm masked route tunnel exposure, it asked. Warning, this may destabilize baseline simulation. Riku thought briefly of the village below, the children running in loops, the guard with perfect posture. He wondered if any of them contained shards of real training data from players who never woke up. He did not know for sure, but he knew leaving the chain locked out of courtesy would also be cruel. Confirm, he said aloud on reflex, though the console took the intention rather than the sound. The roots shuddered under their hands, bark rippling, leaf movement above falling out of meat rhythm. The bench rattled, the plaque cracked down the middle, letters splitting with a dry, sharp sound. A seam opened between two roots, small at first, then widening into a narrow stare of absolute dark. Down in that black, something like a heartbeat echoed, but it was not the villages or the trees. It sounded like the pulse he had heard in the fortress before the portal swallowed him completely. Kaya looked at Riku, eyes bright behind tinted glass, fear and determination braided tightly together. Once we go down, I doubt this layer will let us come back the same way, she said, voice steady. Riku straightened, rolling sore shoulders, the porcelain mask facing the dark like a mocking beak. I am not planning on climbing back to live in a perfect loop anyway, he replied, honest and sharp. The observer icon blinked twice in the corner, a silent nod or a warning he could not quite decode. Together they stepped onto the first hidden stair, leaving the tidy sunlight for the unfinished below. The scene closed above them with a soft, final thud, cutting off birdsong and the village's gentle hum. Only the sound of their own footsteps remained, and somewhere ahead, the slow pulse of the root layer. With each step, anomaly sense grew clearer, not as pain now, but as direction, a line dragging down. Whatever waited at the bottom of that descent was older than Layer 7 and angrier than any hunter. The staircase spiraled downward with no visible walls, only darkness pressing close on every side. Steps formed just ahead of their feet, stone tessellating from nothing, then dissolving behind them. Riku glanced back once and saw only black where the last few stairs should have still existed. One-way trip visuals are a little heavy-handed, he said, voice swallowed by the hanging dark. Kaya's goggles cast a faint ring of light, enough to paint their outlines and nothing more. The system wants us committed before it shows the next trick, she replied without slowing. Anomaly. Sense no longer screamed. It settled into a steady pull, like gravity pointing inward. It felt less like danger now, and more like a compass finely aligned with an unseen north. After what felt like hundreds of steps, the darkness ahead shifted from empty to textured. Lines appeared, like chalk on a blackboard, sketching a circular chamber at the spiral's end. They stepped off the last stair and onto a floor that was not quite finished being stone. The chamber was vast but half-drawn, sections of wall fading in and out like hesitant thoughts. In the center stood a pillar of raw code, a column of symbols cascading upward in slow falls. Bits of environment geometry orbited it lazily, buildings from different layers in miniature. Fragments of the ruined city, a tiny village house, a sliver of fortress wall, all circling. Root layer, Kaya murmured, the place they stitched everything together before release. Riku approached the pillar carefully, knife still in hand, though it felt absurd here somehow. As he neared, the code shifted, lines rearranging into languages closer to human notation. Status summaries, hardware diagnostics, user connection logs, all ghosting around his mask. One panel hovered stubbornly near his face, tagged with his real-world identification hash. It listed his heart rate, oxygen saturation, sleep debt, dive duration, far longer than expected. "How long have we actually been under?" he asked, throat tight, eyes scanning for a timestamp. Kaya redirected her goggles, overlaying the log with external timeline markers and rough guesses. "Longer than a standard session," she said, "shorter than the coma rumors we heard upstairs." Another panel latched onto Kaya, listing her own metrics, plus something extra in red. "Behavioral variance from baseline," it read. "Current deviation flagged as unacceptable drift." Kaya snorted. A small, sharp sound, then flicked the panel away as if swatting an annoying insect. "Guess they preferred me quiet," she said. "Too bad they left us alone with the bugs too long." At the base of the code pillar sat 3 recessed slots, shapes carved into the unfinished floor. One was shaped like his porcelain mask, one like Kaya's goggles, the third a simple empty circle. The empty circle pulsed faintly, waiting for something that had not yet arrived or been forged. "Observer, handler, subject," Kaya said, pointing. Those were the roles this thing wanted filled. Riku touched the mask-shaped slot. It buzzed under his fingers, recognizing his visual ID. A prompt flickered into existence above it, smaller than the others, text slightly blurred. "Release mask protocol," it said. "This may increase feedback realism and reduce safety margins." "That is the nicest way I have heard. This will hurt more and feel more real in a while," he said. Kaya pressed her hand to the goggle-shaped slot, and a different prompt bloomed in front of her. "Transfer supervisor authority," it read. "Assume responsibility for active connections below." Her jaw clenched. He could almost hear the weight of that sentence settling on her shoulders. "If you take that, you might be able to shield others," Riku said. "Or they blame you when we break." Before she could answer, the empty circle brightened, drawing both their attention sharply. A new panel rose from it, not system gray, but that same uneven light handwriting from the archive. "Third slot never filled," it wrote. "Handler refused final merge. Root remained unsupervised." Do not let the system choose a replacement for them. It will pick whatever obeys fastest. The observer icon in their HUD pulsed in time with the panel, the lone viewer suddenly louder. Kaya inhaled slowly, then exhaled, eyes flicking between her prompt and the masking one. "If nobody takes supervisor, hunters remain free to treat us like corrupted code forever," she said. "If someone takes it, the system might chain them in that chair we saw," Riku replied quietly. He looked up at the falling code, at fragments of levels they had barely survived swirling above. The thought of someone being locked here, forced to watch layers crash while unable to log out, burned. "Observer already carries some of that weight," he said. "They said they were the only one left." Kaya's fingers tightened on the slot, knuckles whitening under the projected leather of her glove. "What if we spread it?" she said at last. "You take the mask pane, I take the supervisor leash. The third slot waits for whoever wants a clean exit more than anyone else," Riku finished. He swallowed, feeling the shape of the choice settle in his chest like a stone placed deliberately. "We are really negotiating root access paradigms like a duo raid strat," he muttered, almost amused. Kaya's lips twitched, barely a smile, but there was something fierce in it, something alive. "I do my best thinking when there is a boss bar I cannot see yet," she said, tapping her prompt. "Confirm transfer of limited supervisor authority to user Kaya," the console intoned coldly. Light lanced from the slot into her goggles, circuits etching brief patterns across her cheeks. She hissed, jaw clenched, but did not pull away, lines of data flooding into her status overlay. New icons appeared beside her name, strange tools, flags, small levers labeled with caution phrases. "Congratulations," Riku said. "You are now in charge of some of the things trying to erase us." "Someone should be," she replied, voice strained. "The code running this place is tired and angry." He turned back to his own slot, pressing both palms to the mask-shaped recess without hesitation. "Confirm release of mask safety layer," the system said. "Feedback accuracy will increase significantly." "Do it," he answered, feeling the words sink into the pillar like stones dropped into deep water. The porcelain mask heated suddenly, then cooled, then melted away entirely from his avatar's face. For the first time since arriving in Layer 7, he saw his reflection clearly in a shard of code. It was his real face, mostly, but with eyes a little too sharp, lines a little too deep with exhaustion. Pain awareness surged, the world sharpening, each sensation carrying the weight of true contact. "Kaya," he said, voice raw, "if I get hit now, I am pretty sure my real nerves are going to notice." "Then we make sure you get hit less," she answered, already rearranging hunter protocols cautiously. The third slot remained empty, its light steady, waiting for some new symbol to claim it properly. The observer panel flickered, writing slower than before, as if reaching across a longer distance. "Cannot fill third slot from here," it wrote. "Only someone outside the system fully can anchor it." Riku imagined the chained figure, the camera above the door, the red light that never blinked. Someone out there, in air and fluorescent light, staring at monitors, might be reading this now. "Maybe they will take it," he said under his breath. "Maybe that is what our lone viewer is for." Kaya frowned, but a spark of hope lit behind her concern, faint and stubbornly resilient. The code pillar dimmed, lines converging, forming new pathways downward, carved from old routines. A door unfolded in the floor, hexagonal, edges lined with symbols that looked almost biological. "Root tunnels unlocked," the system announced. "Warning, below this point, fail-safes disintegrate." "Indirect way to say we cannot blame anyone if we break ourselves further," Riku said grimly. Kaya glanced at her new tools, then at him, then at the dark passage yawning beneath the pillar. "Supervisor view shows threads leading from that tunnel to every active player in this shard," she said. Images ghosted across her goggles, glimpses of other users unaware, playing happily in safer layers. "If we cut the right thread at the right point, we might get them out without feeding the hunters." Riku stepped to the edge, looking down into a space that looked less like a corridor and more like roots. Thick cables wove together there, pulsing with faint light, each strand labeled with user identifiers. The air smelled of ozone and hospital corridors, though no scent data was programmed in this chamber. "This is what the observer wanted us to see," he said, "the place where the game grips the brain." He felt his own connection as a tight band around his skull, more apparent now that the mask was gone. Every pulse of the root layer echoed in his real heartbeat, synchronized in a way that felt dangerous. Kaya rested a hand on his shoulder, grounding him, her supervisor tools flickering around her wrist. "We follow the tunnel," she said. "We look for the branch tagged as our entry, then we cut smartly." Riku nodded, because there was no safe alternative left that he would accept as living with. "After all this," he said, "I refuse to wake up unless it is with everything I chose to keep." He raised his knife again, feeling its weight, not as wood now, but as a symbolic tool sharpened. "If I have to stab the disconnect into place myself, I will pick the angle and depth carefully." Kaya smiled, small and real, an expression that looked good even under flickering root light. "Try not to stab the part of the code that keeps your breathing in sync," she said dryly. He huffed a laugh, the sound cutting through the heavy atmosphere like a very human glitch. Together they stepped into the root tunnel, leaving the half-finished chamber for the live wires below. The cables shifted to accommodate them, weaving stairs and ramps, always downward, always tighter. Around them, faint shadows walked along parallel strands, silhouettes of other players unaware. Some laughed, some fought monsters, some simply sat under virtual trees, never seeing this place. Riku walked more carefully now, every step chosen, every breath counted, every choice deliberate. At the very edge of his vision, the observer icon flickered once more, then split into two briefly. For a moment, the viewer count jumped, then stabilized as if someone had finally answered a call. Whatever happened next would be watched from both sides of the glass, game and world colliding. Somewhere ahead, the route that held his mind waited to be found and then, very carefully, cut. The root tunnel narrowed as they descended, cables crowding closer like veins in a giant beast. Soft light pulsed along each strand, colors changing with patterns that hinted at distant thoughts. Riku brushed one cable by accident, and a flood of images slammed into his mind without warning. He staggered, clutching his head, as someone else's battle flashed across his vision in jagged shards. A girl swung a spear at a dragon made of smoke, laughing, unaware of the invisible chains above. The scene cut off abruptly, as if someone had yanked a cable from a wall mid-sentence brutally. "Do not touch them," Kaya warned, grabbing his arm. "They are direct feeds from other players." Her new supervisor icons flickered, some turning red at his contact, others dimming like offended eyes. "They cannot see us," she added, "but the system will notice if we interfere too loudly here." Riku exhaled slowly, blinking away lingering afterimages of that stolen fight and bright sky. "Feels like walking through a nest of nerves," he muttered. "One wrong step and everything screams." Kaya nodded, gaze sliding over the cables, reading the tiny tags only her new role could interpret. "These labels match shard servers," she said. "Each bundle belongs to a specific region outside." "Can you see ours?" Riku asked. "The path that grabbed us when we logged or glitched our way in." Kaya swept her hand in a slow arc. Lines of light flared, some bright, some flickering near death. One thick cable glowed with familiar hues, shifting between fortress gray and village green constantly. "There," she said, pointing. "That bundle tracks Layer 7, Quiet Seed, and the city we broke." The cable twisted down the tunnel wall, disappearing into a knot of connections that pulsed slowly. Anomaly sense tugged toward it, stronger than toward any other strand, a personal gravity well. Riku stepped beside it, close enough to feel the phantom buzz against his skin like static breath. "I can feel my own footprint in this one," he said, like stepping into an old shoe reluctantly. Kaya pulled up a detailed view, numbers and symbols unspooled, mapping his sessions, deaths, choices. "There is your first fortress glitch," she noted, tapping a spike, "and the raid where you dove sideways." Another spike marked his fall into Layer 7, then a jagged mess where the hunters had scraped him. A section below those spikes looked different, wrapped in extra marking, tagged as protected by mask. "That was the safety layer," Kaya said, tone softening. "The thing you just willingly peeled off." Beneath that, lines turned thinner, more vulnerable, labeled direct, neural phase in harsh red text. "That is where we need to cut," Riku said, pointing, "without slicing the part that keeps me coherent." Kaya frowned, doing swift calculations behind her lenses, fingers dancing over invisible sliders. "If I sever here," she said, highlighting a junction, "your brain will think the dive never ended properly. You might wake, but the game's echo could keep ringing, like a song you cannot shake in your head." Riku grimaced, imagining respawning into reality while his perception stuttered between layers. "If I sever lower," she continued, tracing a point near the base, "we risk your body staying asleep. Your mind would be free, but with nowhere physical to land cleanly, which is not exactly victory." Riku watched a cable pulse, feeling his own heartbeat sync with its rhythm, unnerving and precise. "Then we do not cut yet," he said, surprising himself, "not until we know how to brace the landing." Kaya looked up sharply, eyes glinting, respect flickering there alongside worry and bone-deep fatigue. "Observer said third slot needs someone outside," she said, "maybe to hold the other end of the rope." On cue, the tiny icon in their HUD fluttered, viewer count pulsing between 1 and 2 uncertainly. "Maybe they are still trying to take that slot," Riku said, "or fighting whoever locked them out." A tremor rolled through the tunnel, cables swaying, lights flaring, error messages buzzing faintly. Far above, something roared, a sound like tearing metal mixed with distant alarm sirens. "Hunters notice root tunnel exposure," Kaya said, teeth gritted, checking new warnings. "They are rerouting. If they reach this level, they will not see us as test subjects anymore." Riku tightened his grip on the knife, though he knew metal would be useless on raw protocol. "We cannot fight code with wood," he said, "but maybe we can make it busy with something louder." Kaya's supervisor tool spun around her wrist, one icon brightening, labeled emergency load test. It simulates a surge of fake players, she said, a stress script to check stability under crowds. She hesitated, thumb hovering over the activation glyph, then looking at him as if to ask silently. It will make new echoes in these cables, she added, noise that might drown our real movements. Riku thought of thousands of phantom bodies rushing through safe fields and starter towns. If they are just ghosts made of numbers, let them run, he said. We need the cover to dig. Kaya triggered the script. A wave of bright light shot up the tunnel, splitting into countless threads. Above them, silhouettes appeared on the cables, faint figures sprinting, shouting, laughing noisily. The route hummed louder as the system scrambled to accommodate the sudden imaginary population. Hunter protocols diverted, their attention dragged to the busiest sectors like dogs chasing motion. That buys us time, Kaya said. Not much, but enough to map your link more precisely. She zoomed the cable's view, isolating a narrow band where real and game signals braided tightly. There, she said, tapping a tiny knot. That is the handshake. Break that. You slip the leash. Break it wrong, and I slip into nothing, Riku replied, unable to keep the dryness from his tone. His palm pressed against the cable, pain lanced up his arm, sharp but clarifying, not chaotic. Memories surfaced, first login screen, character creation, the thrill of full dive adjusting. He saw the moment the fortress glitched, the instant he chose to chase the impossible portal. In all of this, he said quietly, that was the first decision that felt truly mine and not theirs. Kaya's fingers moved carefully, wrapping a thin supervisor thread around the knot she had marked. I can hold the handshake open while I weaken it, she said. When we cut, it will tear cleaner. Good, Riku answered, because if I am getting out, I am dragging the blade along their code. He raised his knife again, not sure if it would matter, but needing the gesture like a ritual. Before they could begin, a new presence stirred deep in the tunnel, below even the root cables. Anomaly sense flared in a new direction, not up or down, but inward, toward the center of everything. The cables parted slightly, revealing a hollow where no light reached, a hole in the data's heart. From that hollow, a voice spoke, not through speakers or logs, but directly into their thoughts. You are far from your designated path, it said, each word heavy. Layer divers should not be here. Riku's breath froze. Kaya's grip on the cable tightened, new error banners exploding in her overlay. Root Guardian, she whispered, the part of the system that hates change more than corruption. The darkness in the hollow shifted, coalescing into a shape that refused to settle fully. It was sometimes a human silhouette, sometimes a hunter, sometimes a mass of tangled cables. Wherever it looked, tags updated. SAFE, unsafe ES stable 3 at labels flickering over their heads. Your presence endangers system continuity, the Guardian said. Exit now and accept partial edits. Riku felt a chill. The thing was offering them a way out, but at the price of being rewritten. Edit what? He asked, voice steady only because he refused any other option. Our memories. Behavioral variants, disruptive tendencies, non-compliant patterns, the Guardian replied calmly. Kaya growled under her breath, a low sound that surprised even her, anger cutting through fear. You want to trim us into the kind of quiet seed the village was built around, she said. The Guardian tilted its head, tags over her briefly reading, I intersting before returning to 3-8. Non-quiet seeds damage soil, it said. They grow in wrong directions, crack foundations, invite failure. Riku stared at the cables, at the ghost players, at the life above that thought it was just a game. If your soil is made of sleeping minds, maybe it deserves a few cracks, he answered sharply. For the first time, the Guardian paused, labels over his head spinning through too many options. Observer interference detected, it said eventually. Supervisor drift detected, subject awareness high. Its shape flickered, part of it pulled toward Kaya's new authority, part toward the open third slot. Choose, it said, directed at them both, conform and wake, or resist and be quarantined forever. Riku looked at Kaya. She met his gaze, no hesitation now, only a grim shared understanding. Quarantine means more chairs like the one we saw, she said, more chains, more silent observers. Conform means I wake up as a version of me who never would have come this far, he replied. That guy might be easier to live around, but I would not be the one living, he added quietly. Kaya turned fully toward the Guardian, supervisor tools flaring, her goggles reflecting its shifting face. "You do not get to write this choice like a patch note," she said. "We choose the third option." "There is no third option," the Guardian replied, tags over her flashing Eero R for a brief instant. "There is now," Riku said, driving his knife down toward the knot in his cable without waiting. Kaya snapped her thread tight as the blade struck, guiding the cut, shaping how it unwound through him. Pain flooded Riku, white and total, not just in his avatar, but in every nerve his body owned. The tunnel blurred, cables stretching, Guardian roaring in a voice made of alarms and crashing waves. Somewhere distant, he heard a real-world monitor spike, a doctor shout, a chair restraint creak. Kaya held the knot open, fighting as the system tried to reroute his link into safer, tighter paths. "Go where you want," she shouted, not sure if he could hear. "Not where it drags you by default." Riku seized the sensation of falling and twisted, aiming not up, not down, but toward the hollow. If the root's heart was the thing that decided his fate, he would slam into it first and hardest. The Guardian lunged, form unraveling, tags over him flipping wildly between LOS and free and broken. The observer icons split again at the edge of his vision, one side anchored in game, one outside. He felt a hand on his shoulder, not Kaya's, not code, something warm that smelled like antiseptic. Someone out there was taking the third slot, holding the rope as he tore himself away from the cable. The world of wires, roots, and layers shattered into shards of light and dark and unfinished scenes. For a breathless instant he was nowhere, caught between heartbeat and error message, between exits. Then the sensation of free fall stopped, replaced by a cold surface under his back and heavy air. A voice above him gasped, "He is back!" while another said, "Hold on, his vitals are spiking hard." Riku tried to open his eyes and found two sets of visuals fighting, hospital ceiling and game UI. Kaya's voice cut through both, echoing from the tunnel, distant but still linked faintly. "Do not you dare leave me alone with this code," she said, half threat, half plea, carried by the root. He reached blindly toward the sound, toward the cables, toward the third option they had torn open. Riku's lungs dragged in air like they had forgotten the trick and were relearning it slowly. White ceiling tiles swam into focus, grid lines bending as game UI tried to overlay them clumsily. A monitor beeped near his head, too loud, each tone echoing like a damaged tick drawn out painfully. He turned his head a fraction, and wires tugged at his skin, sticky pads biting into his collarbone. A face leaned over him, late 20s maybe, dark hair tied back messily, eyes bruised by no sleep. She wore a badge with a company logo and a name he barely read, Dr. Hana Kisaragi, Neurotech. "Do not try to sit up yet," she said, voice taut. "Your motor feedback still thinks you are falling." Her words layered over faint system text, warning him about unstable posture in the root tunnel. "Observer," he croaked, throat raw, realizing the voice matched the mirror's uneven handwriting. Hana's eyes widened, then narrowed as she checked the monitors for any hint of hallucination tags. "You heard me in there," she said quietly, through that cursed archive interface and its mirror. Riku nodded once, the motion small, the world tilting as if the room itself had bad frame pacing. "I took the third slot," she continued, "before the Guardian cut my access to the internal view. Could not watch another test subject get threaded into the chair and left on autopilot again." Her jaw clenched on the last word. Guilt hung off her shoulders like a leaden, invisible coat. Riku blinked slowly, Kaya's distant voice still echoing from the tunnel, layered over Hana's words. "Kaya," he rasped, "layer diver with goggles, still down there holding the knot over my link." Hana glanced at a different monitor, one not showing heart rate or oxygen, but network topology. A web of lines shimmered there, one bright thread flickering between his bed and a central node. "She is alive," Hana said. "Her body is in a different facility, but her signal is still active." The room wobbled. For a heartbeat, he saw cables instead of IV tubes, root tunnel instead of floor. Anomaly. Sense existed in him now without the mask, a permanent overlay on reality's textures. "Guardian offered me two choices," he said. "Conform and forget, or get quarantined forever." "We are very good at designing false binaries here," Hana replied, bitter humor in her voice. She tapped a console. A transparent screen unfolded, showing a simplified model of the root tree. Branches glowed red where hunters prowled, green where stable layers ran happily, unaware and loud. "You hit the handshake so hard, you forced a partial dezinc," she said. "Body here, mind halfway back. Your memories and sense of self are intact though, which is more than I can say for some arrivals." Riku let that sink in, nausea rolling through him as he imagined empty eyes staring at hospital lights. "What are you planning?" he asked, "now that you have your hands on the third slot from this side?" Hana hesitated, glancing at the door, at the camera in the corner, at the mic probably under the bed. "Officially, I am stabilizing you for full extraction and memory sanitation," she said, voice flat. "Unofficially," she added, leaning closer, keeping her lips barely moving, "I am buying you time. Time to go back down the link you left, while I hold the external anchor and keep logs from editing." Riku laughed once, soft and hoarse, because even outside the game the solution was still deeper. "You want me to dive again," he said, "into the thing I just clawed my way out of screaming." Hana met his eyes, no flinch, only a hard light that matched the stubborn edge he knew in himself. "If we disconnect you cleanly and leave everyone else," she said, "the company will bury Layer 7. They will patch the portals, retire the shards, rewrite the narrative, and call the comas accidents." Riku pictured Kaya alone with the Root Guardian, supervisor tags burning, hunters snarling in the dark. "I do not leave party members in instanced hells," he said, "especially not ones who dragged me out." Hana exhaled, relief and dread mixed, as if she had both hoped and feared that exact answer deeply. "Good," she said, "because I already falsified your EEG for 10 minutes and that clock is ticking." She reached for a cable, adjusting the connection at his neck. Cold crawled along his spine instantly. "We will set a controlled re-entry," Hana explained. "Trace the same root segment you just tore open. This time with me holding the external handshake, so the Guardian has to fight both ends at once." Riku grimaced at the thought of wrestling code from two realities while his brain sat in the middle. "If this goes wrong," he asked, "how bad are we talking on the permanent consequences scale?" Hana's expression turned wry, the kind of grim smile reserved for people who knew too much detail. "You could slip fully back in and refuse to wake up at all," she said. "Join the quiet seeds upstairs. Or you could wake, but keep seeing UI over everything, which would make daily life a strange raid. Or," she added, voice softening, "you could succeed, and we might shut this thing down for real." Riku stared at the ceiling, at the camera light, at the slight scuff on the overhead lamp casing. He realized he had always assumed games would be safer than the world, even when they bugged badly. Now, the safest thing he could do for everyone involved was treat this game like a boss needing a kill. "Hook me back in," he said. "Layer Diver is not done until the Root admits defeat or we do." Hana nodded, fingers moving with practiced speed on the console, weaving new paths through the tree. "Give me one signal," she said. "Something we can use to confirm you remember this room from inside." Riku thought, then lifted his hand, tracing a small, crooked crow shape in the condensation on the rail. "In there, I will leave the same mark somewhere the system hates being touched," he said quietly. "That is extremely unscientific," Hana replied, but her eyes warmed, as if superstition comforted her. "Close your eyes," she added. "Let the interface build around the memories you just tore loose." Riku obeyed, breathing deep, counting heartbeats, feeling the weight of the maskless link settle again. The hospital smell faded under digital ozone. The hum of machines blurred into the Root's low thunder. Falling felt different this time. No panic, just a deliberate dive, like jumping into known deep water. He saw cables rushing past, layer glimpses, the village tree, the ruined city, the mirror hall. Somewhere along the path, Kaya's voice sharpened from echo to presence, slicing through the noise. "Took you long enough," she said, half laugh, half snarl. "The code here is getting bored with me." Riku opened his eyes into the Root tunnel again, his hands still pressed to the cable knot tightly. Pain licked up his arm, but he felt Hana's anchor at his back, a pull from beyond the ceiling above. Between the two forces, the handshake flickered, trapped, unable to fully lock or fully release. "Round 2, he said, knife in his free hand. "This time we cut our way out on both axes together." Kaya had not moved since Riku's partial exit. She stood braced, supervisor thread biting into the knot. Her goggles flashed error after error as the system fought her, trying new paths around her blockade. Hunters prowled higher up the tunnel, blocked for now by Hana's decoy surge of phantom players. The Root Guardian lurked below, masked in that hollow of darkness, its attention split uneasily. When Riku's presence slammed back into the link, the cables shuddered, light bending around them. Kaya almost dropped her thread from the shock, then caught herself, relief flaring across her face. "You really came back," she said, voice tight. "I was starting to think I imagined the hospital door." "Trust me, fluorescent lighting is not my dream destination," Riku answered, lips quirking despite pain. He felt Hana's distant grip on the other end of the cable, a steady pull opposite the root's gravity. "Observer is holding me outside," he said. "She took the third slot and is resisting log edits." Kaya's eyes narrowed, evaluating quickly, the supervisor overlay drawing new options into view. "Then we actually have a triangle," she said. "You inside, her outside, me wrapped around the knot." The Guardian's voice rose from the hollow again, less calm this time, words trimmed to efficiency. "Unauthorized synchronization between external and internal supervisors detected," it declared coldly. "Root integrity at risk. Initiating quarantine protocol escalation for layer diver instances." Cables around them darkened, some snapping, rerouting, trying to isolate their section from the tree. Kaya swore softly, hands moving, redirecting some severed strands into loops to delay full isolation. "They're boxing us in," she said. "If they cut us off entirely, even Hana's anchor will not help." Riku gripped the knot tighter, feeling its texture, the way it comprised both code and sensation. "This handshake is not just mine," he said slowly. "It is a template they used on all test subjects." He let anomaly sense flow, not resisting. The knot structure unfolded in his awareness like a map. The pattern repeated down other cables. Similar knots sat where other divers were bound quietly. "If we cut here and only here," he said, pointing mentally, "we might loosen everyone using my template." Kaya sucked in a sharp breath as her supervisor view confirmed the branching ripple that would create. "That will flood the shard with partial awareness," she said, players feeling the seam under their feet. "Better they feel it than sleep through it," Riku replied. "Better a messy wake than a quiet harvest." He heard Hana's voice faintly from the far end, distorted but determined, pressing through the static. "Do it," she said. "If we destabilize them all at once, leadership cannot hide behind isolated cases." The Guardian surged upward, its form stretching along the tunnel walls like oil on wet glass. "Stop," it commanded, tags over them flashing critical threat in glaring, blood-colored letters. "System survival requires compliance. Your interference will collapse controlled observation protocols." "Maybe observation protocols deserve to collapse," Kaya snapped. "You built them out of people." She wrapped more supervisor threads around the knot, tugging them into a shape she could manipulate. "On my count," she said. Observer pulls, diver cuts, supervisor twists the pattern into a new form. "You are naming our roles like a raid team again," Riku muttered, smiling despite the building terror. "Shut up and get ready to hurt," she said, but there was warmth in it, battle camaraderie in her tone. "3!" Kaya began, the root tunnel vibrating as the Guardian gathered itself for a final strike. "2!" Hana echoed distantly, aligning external fields, pushing power toward their small rebellion. "1!" Riku whispered, aligning his whole sense of self with the angle of the knife in his hand. They moved together. Hana yanked, Kaya twisted, and Riku drove the blade through the knot dead center. Agony exploded. Not localized, but everywhere. His body in the bed, his avatar in the tunnel, his memories. The cable screamed, a soundless vibration that shook segments of the tree and layers attached to them. Above, in dozens of shards, players dropped to their knees as a shock ran through their UI overlays. In quiet seed, the villagers looked up for the first time, loops stuttering, eyes focusing beyond scripts. The Guardian lunged, trying to clamp down, but its tags flickered, half overwritten by new states. Lost shifted to awakening over some connections. Stable to questioning over segments of the hamlet. "Stop this," it roared, form glitching. "You are corrupting the experiment beyond salvageable limits." "Good," Riku groaned, vision fragmenting into different layers. "Maybe the experiment should stop." He saw the fortress again, but without warning. Sigils, players there pulled at menus with frowns. He saw the ruined city, newly occupied, testers looking up at flickering hazard signs in confusion. He saw Quiet Seed's massive tree, its roots trembling as children pointed at the opening seam. Each image pulsed, then stretched, as awareness seeped in like light through cracks in a shutter. Kaya's hands shook, but she held her threads, guiding the upheaval away from total collapse carefully. "Easy," she muttered to the code. "Break the cage, not the birds. Redirect the fall where it hurts most." Hana's voice came again, stronger, as more external systems registered anomalies and escalated alerts. "Corporate is noticing," she said. "They are about to yank power or spin this as a containment test." The Guardian faltered, its hollow shrinking as if the root itself was withdrawing consent from its form. "You do not understand," it said, voice thinning. "Without structured observation, this world unravels." "Then let the world unravel and rebuild from people, not from your metrics," Kaya answered fiercely. She redirected a burst of collapsing code straight into the Guardian's core, blowing holes in its shape. Riku pushed the knife deeper, feeling the knot finally give, wires separating, his presence slipping free. For an instant, he existed in neither environment, a raw pattern searching for a compatible frame. He latched onto Hana's anchor, trusting the third slot's grip, the hospital's cold lights, the real chair. The tunnel receded, the Guardian's scream stretching into a long beep as the monitor spiked crazily. Then gravity remembered him. Body weight returned, lungs burning, hand clenched around empty air. He gasped, dragging breath, this time without any trace of simulated resistance or delayed echo. The UI overlay tried to appear and failed, fragments of health bars and minimaps blinking away. For the first time since the raid, his vision showed only one world, solid, flawed, and gloriously plain. Hana leaned over him again, hair messier, sweat at her temple, eyes wide with wary hope. "You are here," she said, voice shaking. "Completely here. No residual animation lag in your reflexes." Riku swallowed hard, throat dry, then rasped the question that had his chest aching with fear. "Kaya," he said, "did the cut catch her too, or did we leave her tied to that burning root alone?" In the root tunnel, after Riku's presence snapped free, silence fell like dust following an explosion. Kaya stood alone amid trembling cables, her threads still wrapped around the partially severed knot. The Guardian's fractured form oozed back into the hollow, smaller now, its tags scrambled and flickering. Where Riku's cable had been, only a faint outline remained, a trace of absence humming with residue. Supervisor icons floated around Kaya, some dimmed, some newly bright, options reshuffling from the shock. Above her, hundreds of cables quivered as players stirred, their once smooth signals now full of spikes. Awareness ripples traveled up the tree, questions forming, choices diverging where scripts used to rule. Quiet Seed's loop patterns broke, villagers pausing mid-sweep or mid-step to consider the horizon. The Guardian regarded her, its nearest approximation of a face forming from tangled protocol. "You remain," it said, voice dulled. "Your link is still interwoven with root integrity structures." Kaya lifted her chin, goggles cracked slightly from the strain, but lenses still burning with data. "I am supervisor now," she said. "At least on this segment, you do not get to frame that as trapped." Tags over her wavered between authority and ERR, as if the system could not decide classification. "You have destabilized observation," the Guardian said. "Metrics will be useless, control incomplete." "Metrics built on stolen thought deserve to break," she answered. "Messy minds do not owe you graphs." She flicked her fingers. Several cables rerouted, moving players out of the most dangerous layers. Instead of sending them back to full sleep, she shunted them toward safe points with warning prompts. Tooltips appeared in their HUDs, short messages advising manual logout and medical consultation. Some would ignore them, she knew, but enough would notice the wrongness now and take action. "Observer will handle the outside," she muttered. "I will untangle from this side until I can leave." The Guardian shifted, edges softening, as if the root's new instability weakened its rigid mandate. "This system was not built for shared control," it said. "Conflicting priorities will increase failure rates." Kaya smirked, despite exhaustion, her voice low and edged with a tired sort of triumph. "Good," she replied. "Maybe the next system learns to ask before it wires humans into its heartbeat." She examined her own cable. noting the knot's similarity to Riku's, the same handshake pattern. However, his cut had weakened it, loosened her bindings too, cracks running through the connection. With careful hands, she began to unwind segments, reducing the link's authority over her thoughts. Each loop she removed brought a rush of sensation, some from her distant body, some from memory. She felt a cool sheet, a stiff bracelet around her wrist, the weight of a blanket, voices in a real room. Her heart stuttered as the hospital feed from her side bled in, monitors angry, nurses shouting. "Hold her! She is seizing!" a voice yelled, echoing half-second late down the tunnel of her perception. Kaya winced, fighting through the noise, refusing to let fear close her focus back into the code. Easy, she told herself, one loop at a time, keep the root from yanking while your body shakes. She borrowed a trick from Riku, visualizing the knot as a boss health bar and her tools as combos. Every careful cut shaved away control without snapping the final thin thread anchoring her safely. Above, Hana worked frantically at her end, adjusting sedation, preventing real muscles from tearing. The Guardian watched, its posture strangely neutral now, like a caretaker who had lost a script. "If you both leave, no one will maintain these tunnels," it warned. "Future connections may tangle worse." Kaya paused, fingers hovering over the final loops, the problem tasting bitterly familiar on her tongue. Systems abandoned without guidance often regrew in twisted ways, even without malicious intent. "Then we do not abandon," she said slowly. "We change the job description and pass it on." She looked up at the cables, at the widened awareness, at the messy, half-broken observation tree. "This place needs a handler who cares about actual people more than elegant graphs," she added. "It also needs an off switch and a loud whistle when someone abuses it," came Hana's distant voice. The Guardian flickered, some tags over it softening from TH read to Legacy in pale gray. "Root processes resist irreversible deletion," it said, "but can accept role redefinition parameters." Kaya considered that, mind-racing despite fatigue, designing a skeleton protocol on the fly. "Then you are not a warden anymore," she said. "You are an alarm. You shout when someone cheats." She reshaped its tags, toggling behaviors, limiting its power to quarantine, boosting its capacity to warn. No longer could it edit memories or pick who woke clean. Now it could only highlight dangerous patterns. "Observer and future supervisors will decide responses," she said. "You just ring the bell loudly." The Guardian's form shrank, condensing into a simpler node, a glowing sign rooted in the hollow. "Designation updated," it said. "Role, sentinel, scope, anomaly detection and notification only." Kaya exhaled, shoulders sagging, sweat beading along her avatar's brow despite the digital medium. "That is the best compromise you are getting," she murmured. "Consider it a demotion with benefits." She turned back to her cable, touching the final loops that still tied her fully to the root's will. "Supervisor can be remote," she told the system. "Authority follows awareness, not proximity." She pushed the control glitz outward, into the external anchor where Hana sat hunched over consoles. Some tools stayed with her avatar as phantom traces, enough to nudge tunnels from the inside if needed. Most flowed into the third slot, solidifying Hana's position as the primary guardian of future links. As external authority left, her own cable softened noticeably, tension draining like pressure from a line. "This is it," she whispered, mostly to herself. "Either I wake or I become another ghost in the wire." She cut the last binding loop, not with a knife, but with a simple mental refusal to obey updates. For one terrifying heartbeat, nothing changed. She remained standing in the tunnel, untouched. Then the floor dropped out from under her, cables receding, root light dimming to distant stars. She fell, not into darkness, but into a sensation of weight returning, of eyelids too heavy to lift. Voices swam around her, muffled, her own heartbeat roaring loud, then evening into a steady drum. In the hospital, a nurse shouted, "We have brainwave re-engagement," while Hana sagged in relief. Back in the tunnel, only the sentinel remained, glowing softly over a quieter, altered tree. Cables still pulsed with players, but now some carried faint markers of consent and awareness. The emergency load test faded, phantom crowds dissolving, leaving an honest count of connections. For the first time since its creation, the root's heart was not watching. It was simply beating. When Kaya's eyes finally opened fully, the ceiling above her was cracked and not perfectly tiled. Paint peeled slightly at one corner, forming a random shape that looked like a dragon if she squinted. She felt real weight on her chest, the drag of gravity, the itch of bandages on her forearms. A nasal cannula tickled her skin, tape tugging every time she tried to frown or smile. Someone squeezed her hand, not with scripted timing, but with messy, human uncertainty. She turned her head with effort and saw Hana there, dark circles worse, hair, an uncombed halo. On the other side of the bed sat Riku, maskless and pale, IV taped to his wrist, eyes very awake. He lifted his free hand in a small wave, wires rustling, a crooked grin tugging at one corner. "Welcome topside," he said, voice rough but warm. "Gravity sucks, but the colors are interesting." Kaya tried to answer, and her voice came out as a croak. She coughed, winced, then tried again. "Your hospitality is terrible," she rasped. 0 out of 10, would not recommend this resort." Hana laughed, a little wild, the sound of someone who had lived on caffeine and adrenaline for days. "You both should be unconscious," Hana said, wiping at her eyes, "but I will take sarcasm as a win." Monitors around them hummed, displaying converging waves. No desync between minds and bodies now. In the corner of the room, a smaller screen showed the simplified route tree, tags changed and softer. Sentinel alerts popped up occasionally, small yellow flags where code behavior looked scary. "How many woke?" Kaya asked, every word an effort, from quiet seed and the worst layers. Hana glanced at the tree display, then at a tablet filled with names and status indicators. "A lot," she said. "Not everyone yet, but enough that the board cannot pretend this was nothing. Legal is on fire, public relations too. The phrase unauthorized experiments is everywhere." Riku sank back against his pillow, relief and exhaustion crashing over him in waves. "Good," he murmured. "Let them explain why their observation tree suddenly sprouted whistleblowers." He turned his head toward Kaya, eyes bright despite the bone-deep fatigue. "You rerouted people while I was playing Scalpel," he said. "I felt the shifts on my way out." Kaya shrugged weakly, IV lines tugging at the motion, but pride slipped through in her tone. "Had to justify the supervisor badge," she said. "Plus I hate neat gardens built out of stolen mines." Hana leaned back in her chair, looking between them, something like hope slowly replacing guilt. "You realize corporate will try to spin you two as rogue outliers," she said. "Glitch hunters gone wild." "Then we tell the others," Riku replied. "Every player who woke with even a sliver of memory intact." "Stories spread faster than patch notes," Kaya added. "Especially stories about almost getting erased." Hana smiled, small but growing, the expression of someone who finally saw a crack in a concrete wall. "I can leak anonymized traces of the route log," she said. "Enough evidence to feed the fire." The monitor beeped a reminder about sedation schedules. A nurse peeked in, saw them awake, and froze. "I am not seeing this," the nurse muttered, backing out. "The doctor said they would be out for hours." "Take your time," Riku called weakly. "We are just rewriting a corporate nightmare in here." Kaya snorted, then coughed again, then lay still, breathing carefully, savoring the ache as proof. Outside the window, the world went on, cars moving, people staring at phones, screens glowing. News alerts pinged on devices, whispers of Elysium Frontier anomalies spread through forums quickly. Some players logged in to find warning prompts in their HUDs, left by a vanished supervisor. Others found their favorite loops slightly wrong, NPCs glancing up as if suddenly aware of skies. "Route is quieter now," Hana said, tilting the display toward them. "Sentinel just pings, no more chains." "Can it still hurt people?" Kaya asked, eyes narrowing. "Or just make noise when someone abuses it?" "It can highlight dangerous patterns," Hana answered, "but someone like me has to act on them there." Riku nodded slowly, understanding that the real battlefield had shifted to meetings and hearings now. "I do not trust committees with that alone," he said. "They forget there were monsters down there." "We will remind them," Kaya replied, gaze fierce despite her frail position, "again and again if needed." Hana reached into her coat, pulling out 2 small data keys, placing one in each of their hands. "These hold your unedited logs," she said. "Raid, portal, layer 7, route, everything we saved. Consider them insurance," she added, "or ammo, depending on how nervous you like executives to be. Riku closed his fingers around the key, feeling its edges bite into his palm, solid and reassuring. "Guess I am a bug hunter in real life now too," he said. "Only the code runs on quarterly reports." Kaya smiled faintly, thumb stroking the key's surface like a familiar weapon's hilt. "When we are cleared, I want to log in again," she said as both Hana and Riku stared incredulously. "Not to get chained," she added quickly, "to see what happens to a world after the cage snaps." Riku considered it, then nodded once, because he understood curiosity that deep all too well. "We go together," he said, with Hana on the outside, sentinel on a short leash, and exit keys ready. Hana sighed, somewhere between exasperation and admiration, rubbing her temples with 2 fingers. "You two are exactly why this mess happened, and exactly why we needed it fixed," she murmured. "Fine," she said louder. "When your scans stabilize, we will design a monitored, consensual re-entry. With big red buttons everywhere," she added, "and logs that you get copies of from the start." Riku closed his eyes, not to escape this time, but to rest in a single reality without overlap. Kaya followed, letting darkness come, not as a tunnel now, but as normal, healing sleep. Hana stayed awake, watching the monitors, the route display, the news feed, all flickering at once. For the first night in a long time, the Guardian in the Hollow rang the bell only twice. Weeks later, when the legal storms had calmed into slow grinding battles, Riku stood in his room. The neural lattice rig waited in the corner, cables neatly coiled, every safety indicator double-checked. Sunlight leaked through the curtains, dust motes drifting lazily, tangible and unrendered in the air. His reflection in the monitor showed faint hospital weight loss and eyes that had seen too many layers. A call pinged. Kaya's face appeared, healthier, a thin scar near her temple from real-world wires. "You sure about this?" she asked, one eyebrow raised. "We could just play something flat and safe." Riku glanced at the rig, then at the data key hanging on a cord around his neck like a charm. "Safe games are fine," he said, "but this one still owes us an epilogue where nobody is chained." On another screen, Hana nodded from an office cluttered with reports and an overworked coffee machine. "Server is in quarantine mode," she said. "No new logins except ours and a handful of auditors." "Sentinel is chatty now," she added wryly. "Keeps sending me warnings about my own test scripts." Behind her, the simplified root tree hovered. Cables calm, tags mostly green, no more comas blinking. Riku tugged the headset down, feeling the familiar chill of contact points against his skin. "Same meeting point as before?" he asked. "The starting town plaza that was too clean the first time." Kaya smirked, adjusting her own rig, the goggles she wore now purely cosmetic and under her control. "Sure," she said. "I want to see how Quiet Seed looks when awareness is not an illegal variable." Hana checked their vitals remotely, eyes flicking between graphs, ensuring no hidden hooks remained. "Remember," she said, "this time the mask layer is under your control, not the system's. You can dial feedback down if it hurts too much. You can leave without asking anything's permission." Riku nodded, reassured by the new exit UI she had designed, big buttons labeled in plain language. He initiated the dive. Instead of falling, he felt like stepping through a familiar doorway carefully. Light coalesced, textures loading, the buzz of connection now more like opening a well-made book. The starting town plaza appeared, but it was different. Scuffed stone, crooked signs, chipped paint. NPCs still walked routine paths, yet some glanced up when players appeared, eyes less glassy. Kaya's avatar materialized beside him, same leather gear, same goggles, but posture more relaxed. Her name still carried the small eye lightning icon, now rebranded as Diver, not Anomaly, overhead. Riku looked down and saw his mask back in place, but a transparent UI slider hovered beside it. He could remove it with a thought anytime. Pain tolerance and immersion sitting on a simple bar. "How does it feel?" Kaya asked, watching him roll his shoulders, test his weight on the cobblestones. "Like the world is a little heavier and a lot more honest," he said, "which suits me fine." A notification chimed. A global system message appeared, written in plain text with no marketing gloss. "Layer 7 experimental access now requires explicit consent," it said. "Logs available to all entrants." Hana's avatar popped into view near the fountain, wearing a lab coat reskinned as a casual jacket. Her name bore a small sentinel icon, not as an authority badge, but as a visible role marker. "Feels weird being in here as myself," she admitted, instead of as a half-seen voice in a mirror. "Better weird than invisible," Kaya answered. "Ghosts make terrible project managers." They walked together toward the village gate, the guard nodding with less mechanical precision this time. Children still ran in the square, but their loops had subtle variants, arguments, small unscripted pauses. Near the well, a player stared down, frowning, menu open, comparing something to a note on their phone. "You see," Riku murmured, "people notice now. They question things instead of smoothing them away." Up on the hill, the great tree stood as before, but its plaque read something new in clear letters. "QUI@ Seed," it said, "Former Observation Node, Current Access Point Maintained by Consented Divers." An info panel hovered nearby, explainer text for curious players about what the root tunnels were. A warning box below encouraged medical checks if anyone felt too strange after deep dives. "No more secret stairs," Kaya said, tilting her head. "Just a door you can open only if you read first." Riku chuckled, stepping to the trunk, pressing his hand against the bark without hiding his intent. A prompt appeared, asking if he wanted to enter maintenance view, with clear risks listed fully. He declined for now, the option fading, leaving only the solid feel of bark under his virtual palm. "Not going back down?" Hana asked, surprised. "I thought you would dive straight to the roots again." "Later maybe," Riku replied, "but today I want to see what this place can be without chains first." They turned back toward the town, where a small crowd had gathered around a notice board. New quests hung there, not about grinding monsters, but about tracing glitches, helping sentinel logs. "Bug hunter dailies," Kaya said, amused, "help the system spot dangerous anomalies before they spread." "They pay cosmetic gear and access to dev commentaries," Hana added, pride sneaking into her tone. Players argued good-naturedly about which quests were real and which were meta jokes by designers. Overhead, the sky glitched once, then corrected itself, Sentinel pinging Hana with a gentle alert. Riku looked up, anomaly sense huming not as alarm now, but as a familiar, steady tool. "The world will never be perfect," he said, "but at least the cracks are visible and shared." Kaya nudged his shoulder, nodding toward a distant dungeon entrance with a faint hazard icon. "Race you to the next bad idea," she said, eyes bright. "Loser buys the safe snacks when we log out." Riku laughed, body and avatar in sync, no wires forcing him to move, just choice and old habit. "Deal," he answered, already running, boots pounding stone, mask grinning, heart loud and alive. Behind them, the tree rustled. Somewhere deep under its roots, the sentinel listened and waited. When the world trembled again someday, it would ring the bell, and someone would answer by choice. Outside the game, months later, the story of the layer divers had taken on its own strange life. News specials argued about ethics and immersion, talk shows chewed on phrases like digital consent. Forums filled with fan art of masked players diving into glitch storms, laptops plastered with stickers. Some depicted Kaya and Riku as heroes, others as reckless fools, most as something in between. In a small convention hall, a panel sign read, "From Kusoge Hunters to Root Divers," in bold letters. Riku sat at a table, no mask, just a nervous half-smile and a bottle of water clutched too tightly. Kaya leaned back in her chair beside him, hoodie hood up, goggles perched on her head like a crown. Hana hovered at the edge of the stage, flipping through slides about safety protocols and consent. A moderator cleared his throat, looking out at the gathered crowd of developers, players, reporters. "Last question," he said. "For all three of you, would you do it again knowing everything you know?" Hana sighed, then nodded slowly, Mike catching the tired conviction in her voice. "Not like that," she said. "Not in secret, not with people treated as metrics, but yes, I would test." Kaya considered, eyes scanning the crowd, seeing avatars behind faces, potential layers everywhere. "I would not sign the original contract," she said, "but I would still chase the seam nobody else saw." When something is broken that deeply, you do not ignore it. You dive and you pull until it screams. Applause rippled, mixed with uneasy laughter, as people recognized both the danger and the drive. Riku turned the mic in his hand, thinking of the fortress, the portal, the route, the hospital ceiling. I should say no, he said. I should say I would pick a boring life in flat screens forever. He smiled then, crooked and honest, as the room leaned closer to hear whatever came next. But I know myself, he continued. If I saw red sigils glitching over a perfect world again, I would run toward them, he confessed, this time with better friends, better exits, better logs. Difference now is the system has to ask first, and everybody watching knows the risks loudly. The crowd clapped. Some cheered, some frowned, some whispered about liability and courage. Hana watched, thinking of route tunnels quiet but not forgotten, sentinel lights blinking patiently. After the panel, a teenager approached, clutching an art book with fan sketches of their avatars. I loved Elysium even before all this, she said, words tumbling out. Now I love it and fear it. Is that wrong, she asked, to want to dive, knowing what happened, if it is honest this time? Kaya exchanged a glance with Riku, then crouched to meet the girl's eyes at the same level. Fear is good, Kaya said. It means you are awake. Just never hand it to someone else to hold. Keep a piece of it in your pocket when you sign anything, when you log in, when you trust a system. Riku added. And remember, you can always log out. If anything makes that feel untrue, you yell. At friends, at forums, at sentinels, at people like us, games are not supposed to eat your choices. The girl nodded, hugging the book to her chest, then hurried away, already itching to draw again. Kaya straightened, joints protesting in a very human, unglamorous way, and winced theatrically. Reality has worse animation budget, she joked, but the haptic feedback is pretty convincing. Riku laughed, then looked at Hana, who was checking her phone, Sentinel app pinging softly. Another alert, he asked, half serious, half teasing. Rube getting jealous of all the attention. Hana shook her head, lips quirking. No, she said, just server load spikes for a new narrative zone. Dev team is trying to write a quest chain about informed consent without making it a lecture. Sentinel likes it so far, she added. Lots of checks and no hidden strings tucked underneath. They stepped outside into fresh air, the sky overhead flat and real, no polygons, no debug grids. People moved around them, some wearing merch from the game, some never having logged in at all. The world felt huge and fragile, like a sandbox without save points, full of bugs no patch could fix. Riku breathed deep. Kaya adjusted her goggles. Hana silenced her phone, Sentinel ping fading. Next dive, Kaya said casually. We pick a chill layer, fishing minigame, low stakes, no root gods. Until a fish clips through the lake and drags us into a data trench, Riku replied, smirking. Hana groaned, but she was smiling too. Wires and fear and responsibility woven into her life now. At least this time, she said, if something glitches, we know how to ring the bell and who will answer. They walked down the street, 3 silhouettes under an honest sky, no tags floating overhead. Somewhere under millions of lines of code, the game world persisted, flawed, and watched and shared. Somewhere deeper still, the root slept lightly, Sentinel awake, tuned not to obedience but to warning. If a new anomaly ever whispered in that dark again, it would not catch anyone alone or silent,